Hi, I'd like to welcome you to our special meeting this evening. I'd like to call our meeting to order. We're going to have a roll call by our city clerk, Kathy Valdez.
The record shall reflect that all members are present.
If you'll all rise, we'll have a pledge of allegiance. We'll be led by Council Member Rigby.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. In accordance with the Brown Act, I'd like to announce that as a result of convening simultaneous meetings, the members of the Buena Sanitation District will receive compensation of $147.75 for the district meeting pursuant to Buena Sanitation District Ordinance 2006-1. And next we'll have the approval of our agenda by City Manager Patrick Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. There are no changes to the agenda this evening.
Okay, now at a special meeting, there's no opportunity provided to speak on matters not listed on our agenda. If you'd like to speak on one of the two discussion items on the agenda, please complete a speaker slip and turn it into our city clerk down here in the end. Each speaker is given 3 minutes to address our city council. And with that, we'll go into our discussion items. And our first discussion items is the draft fiscal year 2018-19 operating budget. Assistant City Manager Ali Zimmerman will introduce the item.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. As the mayor mentioned, I'm Ali Zimmerman, Assistant City Manager, and we will be presenting the draft fiscal year 2018-2019 operating budget. With me tonight is Sarah Taylor, our Senior Management Analyst, who's taken over the budget from Laura Johnson, who retired last year, and Sarah will be providing the staff report tonight.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. The purpose of this discussion item is to review the draft operating budget and receive direction from City Council prior to presenting the final budget at the June 26th meeting. Last fall, staff began preparing the operating budget for fiscal year 2018-19, which covers the period from July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. Revenue estimates were prepared, and based on available resources, a spending plan has been devised that we feel best meets the needs of the residents and the businesses of the city. The agenda report provides a broad overview of all funds, but focuses on the general fund. This presentation will begin with a review of general fund revenue and expense estimates, and will continue with the discussion of the 6 major spending categories. The total operating budget is $138,706,014. It is accounted for in almost 20 funds, most of which are restricted by law as to the type of activity for which the money can be spent. As this slide visually illustrates, unrestricted monies, or general fund monies, shown in green, fund the bulk of the city's expenses, including general government and all of public safety. Restricted monies, or non-general funds, are shown in blue, are a major funding source for specific types of activities. Most of public works, for example, is funded by non-general funds. This next slide shows general fund revenues and resources. Page 17 of the draft budget document provides a summary showing historical data as compared to the projected 18-19 revenues. All revenues are estimated in detail early in the budget process and are evaluated several times before being approved by the city manager. General fund revenues and resources are estimated to be $78,670,773. This includes $73.8 million in new revenue, as shown on the green line in the chart, and an additional $4.8 million from other sources. A majority of revenues come from just a few sources. 31.7% comes from property taxes, estimated at $23.3 million, 24% from sales taxes at $17.7 million, and 18.6% from charges for services, estimated at $13.7 million. This projection includes the council-approved user fee increases from the May 8th presentation of the user fee study. The remaining 25% of general fund revenues are made up of a variety of sources, as shown on the slide, including the 10.9% for Prop L revenue. Proposition L half-cent sales taxes are another component of the general fund revenue. Proposition L revenue estimates are just over $8 million and will be able to fund the debt service as well as $1.2 million in fire salaries. The last element of revenue I would like to highlight is the use of reserves. These monies are not part of the city's emergency reserves, which is currently at $19.8 million. These monies were set aside in prior fiscal years and reserved to fund future expenses such as facility improvements and vehicle replacements. Page 24 of the budget document provides additional detail. As shown on the slide, over $400,000 in general fund reserves will be used in 1819. Are there any questions regarding revenue at this time?
Do you have any questions? Seeing none, we can move on.
Okay. Before moving on to the expense overview, this slide shows projected general fund revenues compared to expenses. As displayed, all the city's property and sales tax revenues are needed to fund public safety costs. This next slide shows an overview of estimated expenses. Page 19 of the budget document provides a summary showing historical data as compared to proposed 1819 expenses. General fund expenses are projected to be $70,467,524. An additional $7,890,295 is needed for transfers out to pay debt service and for subsidies to non-general fund budget units, including $337,000 to the Senior Nutrition Program, $275,000 to the Lighting and Landscape Maintenance District, and $390,000 to the Wave Water Park. All of these subsidies are within City Council approved limits. The remainder of this presentation will review projected expenditures for each of the 6 spending categories. The first page of each category in the budget document includes a list of goals for the coming years. Charts containing historical and proposed expenses for each budget unit, as well as line item expenditures, are also included in each section of the budget document. While staff has consistently managed expenses, there are several areas that the city has limited or no control over, including pension and health care costs, minimum wage increases, prevailing wages, and fuel costs. Vista has always been a lean city. After the pain of the most recent recession, we have worked very hard at maintaining a lean budget while continuing to provide the needed services. Are there any questions before moving on to review the 6 spending categories?
Any questions? Nope, seeing none.
All right. The first category we will review is general government, which provides leadership and administration for the city. A summary of this category can be found starting on page 61 of the draft budget document. General government expenses are just under 12% of the general fund and total $8.1 million. The general government category is financed through the general fund. Are there any questions regarding general government?
I don't see any.
All right. Public safety.
So if I would just want to say, where it says city manager, I probably think it's supposed to be city manager and others. Maybe to make it clear that that's not
Okay,
his salary.
city manager office.
Yeah, maybe, because I don't think Patrick has that salary.
No. That's correct.
Okay, moving on.
Okay. The public safety is the next section that we will go over. A summary of these expenses can be found on page 101. This section includes law enforcement, school safety, and fire services, including emergency medical services. Public safety accounts for just under 66% of general fund expenses and totals $46 million. It requires all of the city's property and sales tax revenues to fund just this area of expense. A notable increase in 1819 is a 6% increase to the San Diego Sheriff's contract. This will start the second year of a 5-year City Council-approved contract. While this cost is very large, contracting with the Sheriff's Department is a very effective way to provide police protection due to the Sheriff's robust capabilities and services. Are there any questions regarding public safety?
Yes, I do have one, Madam Mayor. On the line item for fire training, significant increase from $298,000 to $418,000. Is that because of the increase in fire personnel with the addition of our 4th ambulance?
I believe this includes an addition of a vehicle that is funded through reserves. Let me just pull that up real quick.
Yeah, 83,000 of that is funded, is for a vehicle funded by reserves.
The new one? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we knew that.
Those personnel would be an emergency medical service from the 4th ambulance.
I just had a question about the increase to the sheriff's department. You said we're in the second year of a 5-year contract, and the current increase that's coming up is a 6% increase to their services. Is that correct? And there's another increase the following year and the following year as well?
Councilman Green, correct. There's an increase in each of the 5 years. It's 6% for 18-19, then it goes to 5.5, 5, and 4.5 as we get into the final year.
Okay, that seems like a big increase, but we're under contract for that already, obviously.
We are under
right?
contract. It's actually less than what the county projects their total costs for operations to be, but that's why we negotiate. This is based on, again, their contracts with the Deputy Sheriff's Association, the cost of overhead, their long-term liability, including retirement. And so basically we look at each other's books and we determine what's the best way to get to an appropriate number for all of the cities.
And is this a pretty common percentage increase-wise? I mean, I haven't been on the counts for all these years.
It's pretty average. We used to have a system where there was a fixed cost and a variable on top of it, so you would know there would be at least perhaps 3%, but and then it could be anywhere from another 2 to 5 on top of that. This year we went to a full fixed cost contract. And again, it's not the rate that the Sheriff's Department was asking for, but it's the rate that the cities felt was appropriate. And because it's fixed cost all the way out and decreases in the out years, it gave us an opportunity to better manage our projections to forecast how to fund it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Aguilera.
So just to be clear, we don't negotiate the contract alone, right? We negotiate with other cities, basically as a group.
That's correct. There are 9 of the 18 cities in San Diego County contract with the sheriffs, and we negotiate as a 9-city block.
So who does that include? Like San Marcos?
So the 9
Encinitas?
contract cities are Vista, San Marcos, Poway, Imperial Beach, Santee, Lemon Grove, Del Mar, Solana Beach, Encinitas, and
Fallbrook? Or no?
that's not a city. I didn't count them.
I just want to get an idea of the number of cities that were involved in the
It's half of the cities,
negotiations.
and we pick a team, so we're not all at the table, but we negotiate together.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's all of the questions on that.
Okay. Moving on to community development. This next slide shows the expenses for community development. There it is. The summary of these budget units can be found on page 141 of the budget document. Community development represents 10.1% of general fund spending. As shown by the blue columns in the chart, non-general funds play a more important role in funding expenses in this category. The size of the Vista Sewer Administration, a non-general fund budget unit, is a bit daunting, but this budget unit carries the bulk of spending for sewer services paid to the Encina Wastewater Authority. $5.5 million in total, $3.9 million from Vista Sewer Administration, and $1.6 million from the Buena Sanitation District Administration. Total expenses are expected to be less in 18-19 than in 17-18 for this category. This reduction is a result of the decrease in redevelopment activity. Some increases include stormwater engineering professional services in response to increasing state water regulatory requirements. Are there any questions regarding the category of community development?
I don't see any.
Okay. The summary for Public Works, which is 5% of the general fund expense, can be found on page 212. As you can see by the blue columns in the chart, a majority of Public Works funding comes from non-general fund sources. The delivery of sewer service accounts for over 35% of total expenses in this category. Again, total expenses for this category are expected to be less in 18-19 than in 17-18. The decrease in this category is due to the replacement expense of 2 Vector trucks in fiscal year 17-18 that is not necessary in fiscal year 18-19. Are there any questions regarding Public Works?
Councilmember Aguilera.
So I have a couple different questions on this. So for graffiti, I saw that we have graffiti abatement 283 proposed budget. Is that up from the previous year? Really my question is just how's the Access Vista app contributing to that is, do we notice that we're like fixing more graffiti moving than we've done in the past? And are we budgeting more, or do we need to budget more for that?
No, I don't think we need to budget more for that. The 283 covers 2 full-time positions, 2 trucks that go out and take care of the graffiti 5 days a week. And I think from a graffiti standpoint, like potholes, we are on top of it.
Okay.
And graffiti's eradicated during the weekdays within 24 hours usually when it's on public property.
Thank you. And then my other question has to do with allocated costs. So I noticed the allocated cost here is about $3.5 million, and it seems really high compared to some of the other divisions, like community development, general. I mean, in my understanding of the allocated costs, it's, I guess, insurance, technology, fuel, and maintenance of those vehicles. I mean, is that?
It includes the internal service funds, so the risk, which has the group rate insurance, and liability, information technology, fleet maintenance, and
Because I think,
risk.
I was going to say, in addition to the fire department with the large vehicles, this budget unit has the most vehicles and equipment that's maintained. And so part of that allocated cost is going to be a little heavier for the public works unit.
it just seems like we should be breaking, for this department and the fire department, we probably should be, it just seems like we would break it down. I mean, because that's part of their department. It's not like I can see for engineering services and that, they're going to have vehicles and stuff go out to, so that's going to be just kind of a side thing, side expense that obviously has to be accounted for, and maybe can be absorbed through the general, then reallocated like we're doing here. But it seems like, so I mean, I just don't understand why we're lumping it into allocated costs.
It is broken down in the line item expenditures for each of the account pages. On the summary sheet on page 205, it's just one big line item. But within each of the accounts, it's broken down within the account and then subcategories. So you'll see the fleet line item, the facilities line item, IT, user charges, general overhead. So they're all broken down there.
Okay. All right. I'll take a better look at that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on Public Works? Anybody? No? Okay.
Okay. Recreation and community services. It is 8.4% of the general fund expense and is related, 8.4% of general fund expense is related to this category. This summary for this area of expense can be found on page 257. This category includes recreation programs, the Vista Adobe, senior services, senior nutrition programs, cultural arts, and the Wave Water Park. Recreation and community service programs will be impacted for years to come as a result of governor's legislation to increase minimum wage to $15 per hour by the year 2022. The city employs almost 500 temporary and seasonal employees during the year to support the various recreation and community service programs. A $1 per hour increase effective January 1st, 2019 has been included in the budget. Are there any questions regarding recreation and community services?
Councilmember.
I just have a question. I see that the senior services budget's been cut by like $54,000 for the year, and I'm wondering if we're cutting any like programs that are going to be affecting our seniors, or if we just got like a good deal on something and we're saving the money.
I think a portion of this is a position that was moved into the nutrition category, so there is a small increase there as well.
I don't see any changes that were significant. It looks like they've had decreases in some of their professional service contracts, as well as the change in the position, and their special department expenses are also decreased. One of the big things in special department expenses, the Culture Caravan day trip programs, which are budgeted at an amount to recover the cost completely. So it's possible that they're just modifying some of those potential trips, and so that budget line item is coming down as well.
Is it going to increase the cost of those trips to our seniors?
Well, each trip is different, and it's a culture caravan is actually open to all ages if you're
Gotcha, yeah.
interested in taking a trip. So a trip
James in
to
charge.
Petco is going to cost a whole lot less than a trip to the Hollywood Bowl. So they're based, and if there's an overnight accommodation, so whatever it costs the city to put on that, we directly pass it on. The goal is not to overcharge, nor is it for the city to be subsidizing an activity like that.
All right, but from a transportation, food program standpoint, we're not cutting anything that would directly affect our seniors.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rigby.
Ms. Zimmerman, I just wanted you and I met and talked earlier about the electric carts at the senior center and making sure that we have the funding available to either repair them and get them both back online or to replace it once we decide which is going to be the most economical way. Because we bought it used, but we've had to repair it a few times. So I know that you were going to look into the cost of getting a new one. So I just wanted to put it out there in the public discussion that was one of the concerns that I had with the senior center, was making sure that both of our carts were in good working order.
Correct, and we are doing our best to get the cart that's out of service back online as soon as possible. And one of the things that the Senior Services Manager requested that is included in this proposed budget is a line item for preventative maintenance and emergency maintenance on those carts, so that we're not coming up against an unanticipated cost and then trying to find money within the existing budget. So that, if approved by the council, will be a much quicker turnaround on repairs in the future.
Right, and I appreciate that, and I think Ms. Meester is in the back, so I appreciate that line item coming up because I know that's been an ongoing discussion this past year, so thank you for doing that.
Any other questions about that? Okay, seeing none, we can move on.
Okay. Moving on to the final expense category, internal services. This summary starts on page 293 of the budget document. Internal service budget units exist solely to support and are funded by charges to all other budget units. There is virtually no outside sources of funding. Internal service funds are budgeted slightly under in 1819 than in 1718. Risk management administration is reflective of favorable group insurance rates for 1819. Fleet maintenance, which is managed by Public Works, is responsible for the replacement of all non-safety vehicles. 18 non-safety vehicles are projected to be replaced in fiscal year 1819. A decrease in information technology cost is largely due to a server room virtualization project expense that occurred in 1718 and is not necessary in 1819. Internal service funds, a non-general fund spending category, are projected at $13.1 million. Are there any questions regarding the category of internal services?
Questions? See none.
Okay. As a recap, budgeted revenues for all categories and funds in fiscal year 1819 operating budget total $139,269,433, with expenses at $138,706,014. The total general fund revenues are estimated at $78,670,773, with general fund expenditures at $78,357,819. The general fund is projected to have a year-end fund balance on June 30th, 2019 of $312,954, though we will continue to refine the budget before the final presentation. At the March 5th workshop, the City Council indicated an interest in increasing the number of sheriff's deputies. Adding one deputy is a cost of approximately $280,000. The fiscal year 1819 impact to add a single deputy would bring the projected time regarding the projected year-end fund balance to $32,954. Staff is looking for City Council direction at this time regarding adding a deputy for next year's operating budget.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Aguilera.
I have a couple other questions too, but I'll put my 2 cents on. I've spoken to city manager about adding deputies, and one of my suggestions that I would like council members to consider is potentially looking at rangers, which would be something in between like a code enforcement and a sheriff. So these types of officers would be able to patrol parks, maybe creeks, areas where we have some issues, but probably don't need a fully deputized sheriff to handle that situation. I think the cost would be significantly less, and we probably have a lot more flexibility with those individuals. So that's something I would like staff to look into. If council would agree to that, I think we'd get a lot more manpower that way, considering that it's $280,000 per deputy. I know the city of Carlsbad is doing this right now. They did it on a trial basis and have decided to hire 2 recently, I think for the cost of probably 1 of our deputies. So it's something to look at. Can I go on to my other questions? Or I forgot a couple questions earlier.
Go ahead.
So I noticed Moonlight Software, they talked about ticketing software replacement of $100,000, and then just right underneath it, annual ticket software maintenance support fee of $52,000. So is that just a one-time thing? I mean, one obviously sounds like it's annual, but the other one, they're upgrading the software.
Correct. The $100,000 is a one-time fee, and then the $52,000 would be the annual cost to maintaining that software.
And we gotta pay them both?
It's being funded through the ticket fee that is added on to the each Moonlight ticket. So it's $1 per ticket.
And it's exactly $100,000 for that?
It's approximately. They're still getting their. They haven't gone out for bid yet on it.
Okay.
It was negotiated the.
So we got to buy the software and get the upgrade at the same time, or the maintenance? Usually you buy it, and I mean, I don't know how this kind of software works, but in my business, we buy the software and it's good for 3 years or whatever, a year. Do we know?
I don't know if anyone from the Moonlight is here, so I don't want to call them out. But if they are here, according to city manager.
So on the software, we haven't upgraded the software, updated the software in many, many years. So this is the time to move forward in that. It also helps out with the website and purchasing tickets, but there is an annual cost to doing it. We do have Colleen Collar-Smith here from the Moonlight, which is our managing director, who can answer the question if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
So likely in that first year, that $100,000, we won't have a full year of service, so that $52,000 will be adjusted accordingly to the $100,000 is the initial fee, but because we won't we'll be doing it mid-year, it won't be a full 52 for that first year, likely, but we haven't gone out to RFP yet.
Okay, and Ms. Smith, maybe you can talk about the benefits of going to the new software.
Absolutely. So our current software system has been purchased twice since we put it into place, and presents a number of challenges for our staff. It ends up increasing our staff time. This last year, they couldn't. We had trouble putting our season tickets on sale. There were a number of issues, and so we ended up spending pretty valuable staff time doing a workaround. We're looking for a system that'll be really user-friendly, that will allow people to do more online, and that will also be able to take some load off of our human resources. So in terms of our rental system, it will also be able to go through our ticketing system. In terms of dinner reservations, those will all be able to go through our ticketing system. So in the end, we're going to see what we anticipate to be a savings and an increase because of the user-friendliness of the system.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
up. I have a question about, or comment or whatever, about TOT. I noticed that it's projected to go down, so I was just surprised. I don't remember discussing that. It seems like that's something that should stay pretty stable or maybe even go up. I guess I'm looking at from 16 to 17 on the revised budget. 16, 17 to 17, 18. It was 1,400,000, and then it's 1,343,000 in 17-18, and it looks like it's going to stay the same. Just curious, more than anything else.
I'm looking at the budget detail on page 28. I'm not quite sure which page.
Right in the middle under other taxes.
Exactly. So we have it going up just slightly. It is lower than the actuals that were received in 2016-17, but as you can see, that was a little bit higher than our prior years, and so based on estimates, we were going to stick very similar to the revised budget of 17-18.
Okay, yeah. No,
but not projecting
not a major
that.
thing.
Yeah.
I just hadn't heard anything about that. So, thank you.
Is that all your questions? Yeah, okay. Councilmember Franklin.
I just want to thank the staff for their good work on this budget. This is a balanced budget. And also, we've got enough space left at the end of the budget to add the deputy, to add one deputy. We had added to our goals at our goal-setting session, adding an additional deputy or two if we could. I think this demonstrates our commitment to increase the public safety in our city by increasing the availability and presence of our deputy sheriffs in the city. I don't think anybody can argue with the idea that more deputies on the street in a broad sense does have an effect on reducing crime and increasing the sense of safety in our city. So I would like to make a motion that we amend the budget by adding one sheriff's deputy at this time, and would be looking for a second for that measure.
Okay, do I have any other, Councilmember Rigby?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When we're talking about adding one sheriff's deputy, and I don't know if this is a question for you or perhaps for Captain Cinemo, I know he's in the back. How do we allocate that particular one position throughout our 24-hour shifts?
So
How
staff,
is that going to work?
when you're bringing on one deputy, it would likely be a special purpose officer similar to the COPS team complement that you see working our transient cases, our graffiti cases, the illegal marijuana dispensary cases that are working on the special projects as identified by the captain, the city manager, and the city council. Those deputies typically work more of a 8 to not Monday through Friday, but not a kind of patrol shift. They work a more standard shift, and so bringing them on would not make a complement lopsided.
Okay, so that wouldn't be a position that we see a beat cop walking down the street regularly. It would be in a specialized area.
Yes and no. It wouldn't be like in a patrol vehicle, but it could be another person that you would see at the Creek Walk on a regular basis, because now they have an additional deputy who's available to work that kind of event or work that kind of activity on Friday night when the Sinopolis Center is really busy. You would see them. They do a lot of foot patrols, a lot of bike patrols typically. And so you would see that presence, but not on patrol and responding to calls for service specifically.
Primarily be focusing on some of your higher priority goals, blight, marijuana currently, those type of issues.
Now, we've had a lot of people talk to us over the years about rangers. We used to have park rangers in Vista, and we don't any longer. Do we remember why we don't have park rangers any longer?
We actually changed the title and the name. Now they're called park directors. They didn't function as a true maybe park ranger that other cities might have that might carry a weapon or some sort of implement. And at the time, we didn't want our park rangers or now park directors having to carry weapons, and so we changed the title.
Okay. Because I do see value, and I know that we've talked about this before, in bringing back a park ranger type person who's dedicated to the parks. We have 18 parks in the community, plus we have all the creek areas. And of course, I absolutely like the idea of adding deputies to the street. but we are still looking at a limited amount of funding at the end of the year. So before we commit one way or the other, I'd like to have a more full discussion on whether or not to take this resource to public safety, absolutely, but in what capacity? How do we want to allocate that funding, and what should another additional officers or officer look like on our community to serve in the best capacity that we need them to at this point? So I'd actually like to investigate this further and have another discussion on it. I'm not saying no to yours, but I think that there's more discussion to be had on this item. So can we bring this back as a separate discussion item?
We can. Currently, so everybody's aware, our code enforcement officers do not carry a taser. They don't carry pepper spray or any sort of weapons or protective tools. In cities that allow for that, it creates a new dynamic. And so you're putting somebody like a park ranger to go into certain situations where they may not have they may not be equipped to deal with the situations that maybe a deputy is. Mm-hmm. So we can have that conversation if you'd like, and we can provide to you the pros and cons.
And that's what I'm looking for. I'd like to just have a more full discussion with both sides or all sides of it, because I do see the need for more law enforcement resources in our community, and I just think we need to discuss how that should be identified. So if we can just have that come back before we make a final decision on that, that would be great. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, we're just looking for the consensus of the council in which direction. So if the consensus is to table the request and bring back more information, we can certainly do that.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, that was my plan, is just have a better discussion on this, more informed discussion. I know El Cajon also has recently implemented rangers as well, I think to help in their homeless situation. And I think that's something that we want to address. And I think if we can get 2 officers for the price of 1, I think we should look at how we can do that and basically leverage that better and not put them in situations where it's going to be dangerous to them. So they would be adequately equipped to handle those situations. So I think, I don't know who would be in charge of that, but
what type of situations are you thinking of?
Well, you said that we, you got to consider the fact that these are not they're not trained to. We might put them in a situation where they're not properly trained. Well, I think that's something we need to look at and make sure that if they only have tasers and pepper spray, let's say, I think that's what Carlsbad's using, then we wouldn't put them in a situation where they're going into drug busts and with gang members and that type of thing. We would put them in parks where typically they're not going to run into a situation where they need a gun, but they could call the sheriff if they needed to.
Okay. And we have code enforcement that works like that now, or park directors.
I think the idea here is that you give them a little bit more authority to deal with people that could potentially create a threat. Dealing with someone that's homeless and maybe on something that come after them or whatever. You give them something to protect themselves. I mean, we're not looking for them to tase people, but to protect themselves primarily.
Maybe even retired military or retired police officer or something that has training. Okay, yeah, let's have that discussion. I'm of that. So,
I'm definitely up for increasing, the safety side, for sure.
Councilmember Franklin, did you want to?
I'd also be interested in including in this discussion a further discussion about the use of law enforcement reserves and how we might be able to grow that program in our city. The Sheriff's Department does have a reserve deputy program for those who have attended the Sheriff's Academy, are accredited law enforcement officers and want to serve their community in a volunteer capacity. I'd like to see us expand that opportunity. And also the law enforcement explorers, the young people who are high school or college age who are pursuing a career in law enforcement and may be in process of either attending the academy or may have recently graduated, or probably pre-graduation. wanted to mention that on Wednesday morning, I had the opportunity to go out into the jungle of Vista, which I hadn't previously known was there, with our COPS team. I see a couple of the deputies here from the COPS team, one of whom was with us, and it was really eye-opening to see the number of permanent encampments in Vista that exist. We all drive by on a literally daily basis and don't know they're there. And getting down into the field and seeing that firsthand, I promise you, is not an environment I would ever return to without the accompaniment of our armed deputies. And were I an armed park ranger, I still wouldn't, without numerous armed individuals, I wouldn't go down to that encampment. I wouldn't think any deputy would want to go down there alone if they didn't have to. I think talking about dealing with gangs, unfortunately, we've talked a lot about how Bub and some other parks do have some gang activity. I think if you're out there and your job is to enforce any law, you could be in a dangerous situation eventually, and certainly if you are armed, then there is a possibility to use that weapon to defend yourself. And so there's definitely a lot to be considered there, some significant liability issues that we need to consider as well. I definitely would like to kind of formally agendize this discussion, if the council would agree to do that, to have the staff prepare some discussion items with some research along the lines that Councilwoman Rigby and the Deputy Mayor mentioned, as well as bring back maybe a report from Captain Cinemo about how, if he were allotted another deputy, he might be able to use that deputy. The city manager had discussed with me that adding a member of the COPS team, which, as they self-describe, are really focused on quality of life issues in our city, would be probably our greatest priority if we're going to add one deputy. I think his thought was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the thought was, where would it make the most difference and be the most noticeable and have the greatest impact on our community in a positive way, and that would probably be the greatest impact. So, I don't want to micromanage how we police. I just want to make sure we have sufficient resources. I know, it's in any effort, any campaign, more resources is better, and better enables you to address the problems that are out there. So, definitely, if I could get a second for kind of a formal agenda item where we ask the staff to do their due diligence on a number of items, I would appreciate that.
Do we need a motion for that?
We need a motion, do we?
No, I think if we have enough,
consensus?
I think we have consensus on that.
Yeah, okay, Councilmember Green.
When was the last time we added another deputy to the force?
It's been a while. I don't know the year exactly, but it
A lot of them
hasn't been in the last 4 or 5 years.
All right. And yeah, I would definitely, obviously, want to allocate the extra money towards public safety. And I'd also want to know in the report how our resources are currently being allocated. Where our deputies are at right now, where where we need additional resources and all that, just to make sure, obviously, that the money is spent in the most effective way possible. So, yeah, please spend the extra money on public safety. And I think the homeless situation, with the COPS team focusing on the homeless, that's out in the community, we get a lot of talk about that. So thank you so much.
So are there any other questions on the budget? Are we all set with that?
Yeah.
I have one question that I just pulled up. Why is the recycling revenue down so much, like 47.6%? That was just I know there's some reason for that, but.
So I do believe that the recycling revenue decreases based on demand for recycled products, and China is no longer accepting a significant amount of product that they used to. And so basically, EDCO, our franchise waste hauler, takes the product, and a portion of that revenue comes back to the city, but if they're not selling it, we're not receiving the revenue for it.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, I just thought it was down almost by half. That was a big chunk. So I just wondered that. Okay, I see. Do you need a vote to approve? No. Okay, I just want to thank staff and everybody that worked on this budget. I know all the departments worked on it, and they did a great job. I know it's tough to cut things and make things balance, and so I appreciate all the hard work, everybody back there, and you that did, working on this budget. So with that, Councilmember Rigby.
I was just going to say thank you to staff as well. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of people working together to come up with the line item by line item by line item for our city's budget. And you've heard what a large budget we have and all the programs that we have in the community and everything that we're doing. So I just want to say thank you to staff for doing a great job on this budget this year.
Okay, so moving on to our second and last discussion items, our city marijuana initiative discussion. And our city attorney is going to go down below. Daryl Piper, our city attorney, is going to provide the staff report. How many speakers do I have? I have 10 speakers. 10. There's 10. Just looking to see what they were.
Mayor and council members, this is a continuation of the discussion we began or continued on May 1. And before you tonight are revised versions of the two ordinances that we discussed on that date, as well as two draft resolutions that would be used to place those ordinances on the ballot. It's anticipated that that will occur at your next meeting in June 12th. So we have about a week to pull that together. On the ballot, as we know, is a qualified citizens initiative for 11 medicinal retail stores, 1 parking space per 1,000 square feet, and you're familiar with the parking problems that we've had with existing illegal dispensaries. But it does include a 7% gross receipts tax. So the council is considering two ordinances. The first I'm going to discuss is the draft business ordinance. Per your direction, this authorizes medicinal cannabis businesses only, the exception being for testing laboratories, which automatically cover both categories by state law. Now, medicinal means that the retail customer must possess one of two things: a doctor's recommendation, in which case sales tax is charged, or a county-issued ID card, in which case no sales tax is charged. So for what the state considers a true medicinal sale is a sale to someone with an ID card. And if you have that, then state law provides no sales tax. But you can still buy medicinal marijuana for any purpose if you have the ubiquitous doctor's recommendation, but in that case, sales taxes are charged. Again, per your prior direction, the draft ordinance authorizes 2 micro-businesses, known as Type 12 licenses, as retail storefronts. And as a micro-business, those businesses must hold at least 3 of the following 4 licenses: retail, cultivation, distribution, and manufacturing. Okay. The ordinance also authorizes 2 delivery-only Type 9 retail businesses, 2 indoor cultivators with up to 20,000 square feet each, which is a Type 3A license. But note that, as I'll discuss a bit later on in the presentation, there are limitations on micro businesses that limit them to less than 10,000 square feet, whereas a type 3A license under our ordinance would allow up to 20,000 square feet. Would also allow 2 manufacturers of a type 6, which does not permit the use of volatile extraction, which is the type, of course, that causes explosions. And it would also authorize 2 testing laboratories. In the allowed zones for the retail licenses, I have modified the definition because, as it turns out, the industrial park zone does not, in fact, encompass everything that I thought it did. So businesses would be allowed in the industrial park zone, light manufacturing zone, Area B of the Vista Business Park Specific Plan, and Specific Plan 14, which is also in the business park area. Two storefront and 2 non-storefront retailer licenses would be permitted. The storefront licenses are type 10s, which allow direct sale to the public. The non-storefront type 9 licenses are delivery only, no direct retail customers. Per your prior direction, hours of operation 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And as I noted earlier, you directed that storefront retailers must also be micro businesses, which means in addition to holding a type 10 license, they also hold a type 12 license. Now, location, we have used the City of Vista sensitive use designations that have been in this process since the very beginning. So no cannabis business within 1,000 feet of a daycare, public or private school, treatment facility, youth center, youth-oriented business, public park, private park, homeless shelter, skate park. Furthermore, commercial cannabis businesses shall not be located within 500 feet of any residential zone. And retail, storefront retailers, those who are open to the public, must be at least 500 feet apart in separation. Now, the result of this, the separation distances between the uses, pursuant to your direction the last time, is measured from the legal parcel boundary to the legal parcel boundary. So that's where you calculate your 500 or 7,000 foot separation distance. As a result of the separation distances required, in reality, only properties in the business park would qualify as acceptable locations for cannabis businesses. As you can see on the next page, we mapped in living color all of the various uses and sensitive uses on the left, but the simplified diagram on the right shows you where they would be allowed, and it's that red and black area shown in the bottom. Every other place in the city is too close to a sensitive use to be able to be used for a cannabis business. Now, I want to go back because we had talked about micro businesses, type 12 licenses. I've understood there is some confusion about that, which is definitely understandable. So I wanted to go back through a couple of slides here to discuss what that really means. So a micro business is a business for cultivation of cannabis on an area of less than 10,000 square feet and acting as a distributor, level 1 manufacturer, or retailer. So the types of licenses that a Type 12 license microbusiness must hold is either a Type 9 non-storefront, a Type 10 storefront, a Type 6 non-volatile manufacturer, or a Type 11 distributor, and cultivation of less than 10,000 feet. However, under the state rules, the 10,000 square feet is not simply the area of cultivation. In fact, the 10,000 square feet includes the canopy, the area in which marijuana is cultivated, also a number of other areas such as storage areas, packaging areas, composting areas, secured areas, storage for harvested cannabis, and if there's any research and development, those areas. So, in fact, the amount of actual growing area is going to be less than 10,000 feet, possibly by a significant amount, because all of these other areas are included by the state when they're looking at a Type 12 license. Furthermore, all of the activities must occur on the same licensed premises. So it's not possible for them to grow in one location, have a different location for retail. Everything has to be in the same place, although there has to be physical separation between certain of the activities. Now, I know a question that had risen before, since we have these licenses. One issue is, does the council want to specify which types of licenses will be required or permitted to be used by a microbusiness? And remember that the microbusiness in this case applies to the 2 retail licenses, not to the 2 delivery-only licenses. All of these licenses are medical only, but the microbusiness applies specifically to the retail locations. A second issue, I think I'll run through these and then we can go back and discuss them individually. Another policy issue is that this includes, the ordinance currently includes a limitation on increasing the number of licenses until July 1, 2020. Again, this ordinance was adapted from Chula Vista. This is an element of their ordinance, and a policy question for the council is, do you want that limitation in there, or do you want the council to be able to change, potentially increase the number prior to that date? Second, or perhaps third policy question, the business ordinance does not contain any taxation provisions. Those are found in a separate ordinance. And the business ordinance is conditioned on the passage of the taxation initiative. If the taxation initiative does not pass, then the business ordinance, even if it passed, would be void. The reason for that is to ensure that there is a tax in place. So the question will be whether or not that's an acceptable way of approaching the issue. The draft tax ordinance has the following rates in it. Adult use, 0 to 12%. And by the way, the zeros here are because the council, under the tax ordinance, has the power to take the tax all the way down to 0 if it feels that's an important thing to do. As you know, the state's apparently currently in the process of reducing their own taxes in an effort to combat black market operations. So for adult use, There's an initial rate of 6%. It can go as high as 12%. Medicinal, the initial rate is 5%, going as high as 10%. Manufacturing, 4 and 8. Distribution, 2 and 8. Testing, 1 to 3.5. And cultivation is actually set at $14 per square foot of canopy space with a CPI escalator annually. As I noted before, the council has the discretion to increase or decrease these rates within these ranges. You would not be able to go above those ranges without another vote of the people. The tax initiative does not authorize any cannabis businesses. It provides a framework for taxation. If such businesses become authorized by a local initiative, such as your initiative, action of the City Council itself, or potentially a state mandate in the days when the state doesn't feel it has enough revenue and feels that everyone should be able to have a dispensary in order to provide taxes to our friends in Sacramento. And the flexibility that we have built into it allows the regulatory structure to be modified as revenue and market conditions or statutory changes may warrant. The ballot resolutions include draft language for the ballot question. And I invite any council comments on the draft language either tonight or between now and next Tuesday, when we have to publish the agenda for the next meeting, regular meeting. State law does require a revenue estimate. The revenue estimate that's currently shown seems low to me. However, I need a factual basis upon which to determine that estimated revenue. So we found a North County medicinal store that had paid sales taxes for 4 quarters on medicinal sales. And in the best of their 4 quarters, they paid the city $73,000, which at a 1%, which is our share of the sales tax, is equivalent to gross sales of $730,000. Assuming we had 4 retailers, this would amount to a little under $3 million annually in gross sales. So assuming that and a tax rate of 5%, you're looking at annual tax receipts of $146,000. And again, this all seems low. So assuming there's some contribution from cultivation and other businesses, this was rounded up to $175,000. Now, we have gone out to see if there are other bases for making a revenue estimate. And we developed this information from the city of San Diego. They have a 5% tax on adult use, which will increase to 8% in 2019 and a high tax rate not to exceed 15%. And thus far, they're showing $369,000 per adult use store annually. They have no tax on medical. While our tax rates are the same, our program is limited to medicinal sales, not adult use sales. So it's not at all clear that our revenue would be equivalent to what San Diego is generating. But it's a significantly higher number per business than the estimate that we were able to develop using sales tax data from a North County dispensary. As an aside, just for your information, to support their program, they have at the moment 3 full-time equivalent positions, plus another close to $500,000 set aside for audits, contracts, banking, and security services. Obviously, we would be incurring some of those expenses. Their program is much larger. On the other hand, they can arguably average their costs over a larger base. Both initiatives, both ordinances, give the City Council full authority to regulate cannabis businesses in the future. And the reason for this is that thus far, state laws and regulations have already changed several times as to what's allowed, how it's allowed, etc. Furthermore, as indicated with the state potentially decreasing their tax rates, the market conditions are unstable and cannot really be predicted with any degree of confidence at this time. And community opinion could change in the future, favoring more access or determining that less access is appropriate. So this, the only exception to this full authority goes back to the first policy question that I asked, which is about no changes until 2020. Otherwise, if that were taken out, changes could come in at any time. That concludes my walkthrough of the presentation. I can take questions now. I also know that there are a number of speakers, and I don't know what the council pleasure is in terms of going through the policy statements and questions now or after speakers.
Okay, does anybody want to start off this discussion? We have 10 speakers, so we'll hear from our speakers first then. Okay, so if, I'll call your name, and then if you'll line up, if one person's here and then the other two will line up over there, I would appreciate it. No clapping, please.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, I just have a quick question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
No
Yes,
problem.
Councilmember Green.
We have two separate initiatives. One is the tax and one is the marijuana. My question for you is, how does the Citizens Initiative include the taxation all in one initiative, and why do we have to do it as two separate initiatives? And then kind of a follow-up to that is, if the draft tax initiative passes, does that supersede the Citizens Initiative requested tax? Thank you.
The answer to the question is the Citizens Initiative has a 7% tax that is created in approximately one sentence without any real explication of how it's to be handled. As a result, I think that the city needs some level of additional detail, perhaps not as detailed as the tax initiative itself, but something beyond that. If the city's tax initiative receives more votes than the Citizens Initiative, it will supersede it.
That is, okay, anybody else? Okay, then we'll start with our speakers. Start with Kyle Menke, followed by Matthew Menke, followed by Carl Hughes. Okay. Can you talk right in the microphone so they can hear you well?
I went home and talked to him a little bit about some of the things that were said, and his response takes a couple of hours of actually working with him, but he's pretty intelligent inside that little body. And he said for you guys to remember that you serve at the pleasure of the people. You don't serve in a position of power. You serve at the pleasure of the people. So remember, if an initiative comes forward, if anything has been brought forward through a consulting firm that has been a result that has told you that the people will vote for it unless you divert the will of the people, then there's going to be some issues. So he's done. That's all he had to say. He didn't say much. I have mine. I'll push him back.
Well, you don't have to do that.
He can
You go
stay,
ahead.
he
You can
can
go
stay
ahead.
here with me.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. My name is Matthew. I am here today with my son, Kyle Minke, to discuss the intent of the City Council in regards to the consulting firm hired by the City Council. It is my understanding, after being told by one council member who says he speaks for several of you, that the firm hired said that there was an overwhelming majority that the Citizens Bill would pass. But that if City Council added a second bill to be voted on, it would split the vote and neither bill would reach the 51% needed to pass. This would leave both bills dead. If that is true, and you vote today to add a new bill to the ballot, then you clearly have intent to deceive the public in order to please your own special interest. If the majority wishes for a bill to pass and you divert that, then you have no longer followed the oath that you swore to represent the people and the American way. You may as well rip down the flag that you have hang on the building because it tramples on the principles for which it represents. I would say such action during an election year can prove to be fatal for an elected official, especially if they have been caught on camera claiming as much. You all have a moral responsibility to honor the oath you gave and do what the majority of the people ask of you. A simple public record search of funds spent, $35,000, and a few interviews reveal the intention intended by hiring the consulting firm. If your intent is opposite of the people you serve, it will become apparent tonight. Do the right thing. Kyle is counting on you. To sum up, 1, $35,000 spent on consulting firm. 2, results that the people want the bill to pass. But if a second bill is introduced, neither will pass. So you all sit up there knowing that. So when you discuss all the stuff that you've discussed tonight and act like how important it all is, you all know that it's a red herring. The evaluation of your intent tonight, will you keep your oath to the people? That's all I have to say.
I would just like to say that nobody speaks for me but me.
I appreciate that. I got that from a phone call from you. Thank
Okay. Okay. So starting with us, Carl Hughes, followed by Kelly McCormick, followed by Michael Sather.
Hello, City Council, Mayor. Back at it again. I just wanted to come today to talk about the issue with marijuana. But first things, I did read a San Diego Union Tribune article about how there are 0 marijuana dispensaries, at least within the city jurisdiction. I wanted to congratulate you guys, and also Daryl DePiper for his hard work. You guys are working hard to keep this city clear of illegal dispensaries and marijuana influence, and I definitely appreciate that. I guess the reason I'm here today is just to show what I've seen recently since the last time I spoke, which was probably like in April or so. So I was reading the Coast News the other day, a pretty popular newspaper, free newspaper within the county, San Diego County. And I was kind of disappointed because I've definitely read the San Diego Reader, and I couldn't help but notice on Section B, the marijuana dispensary here for Tory Holistics. Unfortunately, this dispensary is advertising right next to a whole bunch of stories about youth. So here we have hundreds of SoCal students to compete in Junior Solar Sprint. There's Earth Stewards to Sacramento. Youth environmentalists speak to Water Board. And then up here it asks for youth cooks. So the marijuana advertising, legal. This is actually a legal dispensary out in San Diego. Aches, Paints, and Joints, which is kind of tongue-in-cheek right there. And so this is anyone over 21 legal to buy, but conveniently, it's right next to a whole bunch of youth stories. So I thought that was a very interesting placement. San Diego City Beat, another alternative press. The first thing I noticed at Albertsons, I grab it, I check it out, is the bottom right here, San Diego Recreational Cannabis. Their advertising is right on the front paper. Of course, 21 and up, there's a little deal right there, but that's what they want you to see. The first thing you look at is this advertising here. And lastly, this is an old, actually, magazine that I saw called Sensu, or I'm not sure about the term, but I think it's in reference to a marijuana strain. But this was actually on Rodeo Market on Vista Village Drive in a Hispanic neighborhood. I wonder if they're targeting minorities. But here it's actually talking about recreational marijuana and medical marijuana, the new normal. And this was right out front. So a lot of Hispanic families go there. Even I visit there, but it's right there for people to check out. Interesting placement of their magazine. So I just want to say thank you guys for your hard work enforcing the law, as you guys are hired to do, and you guys are doing a great job. I trust you guys.
Thank you. Kelly McCormick, followed by Michael Sather, followed by Kathleen Lippett. Could the other two, could Michael and Kathleen line up over here too, please? Okay.
Good evening. I'm Kelly McCormick, and I'm here to speak on behalf of children, teenagers, and young adults who are influenced by the decisions you make as a city council. The businesses and industries that you endorse send a strong message of acceptance. The goal of the industry is to normalize pot use, and allowing dispensaries to set up shops certainly helps them further that goal. I urge Vistans to reject any initiative that would roll out the red carpet for the commercial pot industry. Those in favor of pot tried to sell us on the idea that permitting it would somehow eliminate the black market. But we've learned from other cities that it has done nothing of the sort. In California, only a tiny fraction of cultivators have bothered to apply for a license. And right now, state regulators are considering whether to cut state taxes on pot to try to lure more operators into the legal market. The black market is far more lucrative, and since the state's track and trace system is still non-existent, we're asked to rely on the cultivators, manufacturers, and retailers to keep accurate, thorough records of every transaction without meaningful oversight or documentation. This makes it very easy to divert pot and money in a cash-only business. Your proposed initiative permits Medipot, so please be aware that anyone over 18 can legally purchase it. I'm the parent of 2 teenagers, and they have educated me how easy it is to obtain Medipot cards. All they have to do is say they have menstrual cramps, anxiety, back pain, and they'll receive a card. Many, of course, share or sell the pot to their high school friends. In a recent survey, more than 70% of teens in county-funded drug treatment programs listed marijuana as their first drug of choice. And that's not surprising when you consider the addictive nature of today's high THC pot. While pot in the 70s and 80s was about 3 or 4% THC, today with edibles and concentrates, it can contain 80 to 90% THC. Research shows that high THC pot can increase, it's absolutely true. THC pot can increase a teen's risk of depression, suicidal thoughts, and psychosis. This has been published in The Lancet, the British medical journal, which is highly regarded. And it's because their brains are still developing up to about the age of 26, and it makes them much more susceptible to the negative effects. Legitimate patients using Medipot also do so at their own risk. Unlike FDA-approved therapies, Medipot has no uniform standards, dosage, potency, quality assurance, or handling protocols. There are countless strains to choose from, and dosing is a guessing game. Studies have found that many labels list inaccurately the potency of the marijuana, and California pot tests high for levels of pesticides, toxins, mold, and fungus. Thank you.
Michael Sather, followed by Kathleen Lippett, followed by Becky Brundage.
Before my 3 minutes starts, can I give some handouts to you guys?
You give them to our city clerk.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Mayor Ritter and City Council members, for having me up here. My name is Michael Sather. I'm the Director of New Market Development for Solitube International, resident and homeowner in Vista. I've worked in Vista since 1999 when Solitube International moved our headquarters here from Carlsbad. As an employer, we've been the leading innovator in the daylighting industry since we established our headquarters here in the U.S. in 1991. We take a lot of pride being located in the city of Vista and always strive to be an integral part of the community. In fact, we were recently honored by the Vista Chamber of Commerce as Large Business of the Year, and we were very excited about that. We employ many Vista residents, participate in the Innovate 78 campaign, and assist local schools with career development programs. We also host an annual summer block party that's pretty fun. We hope everybody here, everybody is invited, can come out June 21st at 3 p.m. We'll have lots of food and prizes and games. And we give tours of our building to show what we do. So we manufacture Solitube daylighting systems, which are designed to bring sunlight into homes and buildings with minimal heat gain. We've been at the forefront of green building design for the last 2 decades, having been a staple in thousands of LEED projects, including the first net zero schools in the country. So it's no surprise that our technology has attracted the indoor agriculture market. We were approached by a PhD research scientist a few years ago that was doing pioneering work on growing cannabis in the most energy efficient way possible. So we set up a model using sunlight from Solitube as the primary light source, using supplemental LED lights in the morning, early evening, and during overcast sky conditions. The results of this research showed over 80% reduction in energy use compared to typical indoor cultivation environment using high-pressure sodium or HPS lights. He coined this term sun-grown indoor, this method. So currently the most common indoor cultivation methods using HPS lights are producing a carbon footprint higher than any other commercial building type. The California Public Utilities Commission suggests indoor cultivation accounts for 3% of our total electricity consumption. It's 3% of all commercial and residential electricity consumption. That figure is actually from 2012, before the millions, tens of millions of square feet of licensed indoor cultivation facilities are coming online. So a typical 10,000 square foot grow using HPS lights is about the equivalent of 250 residential homes, or 8 times the energy use of a typical industrial building. It's a lot of energy. It doesn't make sense to use this much energy in a legally licensed cultivation facility, especially in this wonderful sunny climate we have in Vista.
So I need you to wrap up.
1 minute. It is our hope that the city chooses to implement sustainability initiatives into any indoor or mixed-light cultivation licensing.
I need you to wrap up, please.
We would just like you to prioritize applications that can help the city achieve the greenhouse gas emissions that are outlined in the City of Vista Climate Action Plan and the California Environment.
Thank you. Kathleen Lippett, followed by Becky Brundage, followed by Damian Johnson.
Good evening, Council. My name is Kathleen Lippett, and I work to advocate for sound public health drug policies that protect youth and young adults for over 20 years. I worked in Vista for 10 years, and I do care about this community. I now live in Poway, and I'm grateful that the mayor and the city council of Poway voted unanimously to prohibit marijuana commercialization. Mayor Valls was unequivocal, saying there was no amount of money that would make him support a commercial sales of marijuana. Like many of California's initiatives, the promises in the titles and summaries often bear little resemblance to what's buried in the text. Prop 64, in this case, is an example of this. The industry spent $25 million to get that initiative passed. $2 million in grassroots was raised, so it's no surprise that it passed. Many people who are familiar with the industry and with drug policy, when they read the title and the summary, said it sounded pretty good to them. The cost to our youth and our vulnerable populations will bear the greatest brunt. Many tenants of Prop 64 have yet, if ever they will, materialize. The safe, clean product expected by the public continues to be tested and found to be contaminated with poisons, toxins, heavy metals, bacteria, fungus, and pesticides. The black market is stronger than ever. Egregious advertising in the form of online advertising, billboards, sign twirlers, and shrink-wrap buses. Tax revenues are falling well short of expectations. Who will hire the forensic accountants needed to regulate this cash business? The industry continues to advocate for lowering taxes so that they can compete with the black market. The cost to regulate marijuana operations will fall to the local law enforcement resources. And most troubling of all is the absence of messaging of the harms of marijuana for our youth regarding the potential harms. Commercializing the marijuana industry has nothing to do with providing medical relief for the seriously ill. It has everything to do with making massive profits. Thank you.
Thank you. Becky Brundage, followed by Damian Johnson, followed by Erica Leary.
Good evening. I'm Becky Brundage, and I'm here on behalf of parents and other community volunteers, and I feel that I need to share our concerns with you. Your decision to facilitate bringing marijuana businesses, retail store, cultivation, manufacturing to Vista. Because the proposed ballot initiative is being written by the city, it looks like that is what the city council wants. Since Prop 64 was about personal use, possession and cultivation of 6 plants, and absolutely not about establishment of pot businesses. That is a city choice, and we wonder why Vista is promoting pot businesses when San Marcos, Escondido, Poway, Carlsbad are not. In fact, 70 to 75% of cities in California are not setting up these businesses. Unfortunately, permitting implies promoting, and the only people served by pot businesses are pot profiteers. Youth and families lose by this. Regarding manufacturing facilities and indoor marijuana cultivation, I am concerned that the regulations do not clearly describe the expectations for the applicant to describe their plans for containment and disposal of contaminated wastewater and polluted water runoff on nearby land and waterways. What will be the process where residences and nearby businesses can seek recourse when they are bombarded with noxious fumes? Will there be an odor ordinance, an air quality control plan? A significant part of manufactured marijuana products are food products, and on page 6 of the State Bureau of Cannabis Control Regulation document, it states that the expectation that there will be an employee that is knowledgeable about safe manufacturing, processing, packaging, or storing of food. That is missing in the city's regulations. And what are the city's staff costs going to be for handling these situations? And what are city's monitoring processes going to be? I have 6 children, 2 of which are in high school. And again, I just want to reiterate what somebody already said in terms of how easy it is to get when it's in these forms of food. And it is so easily accessible by our youth. I am also raising a 2-year-old who is not mine biologically, but I am raising because of drug abuse by his parents. He is the 6th child of this woman, and her drug addiction started with marijuana use. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Damian Johnson, followed by Erica Leary, followed by Kirk Cumming.
Good evening. My name is Damian Johnson. In the past, I had suggested that there be a comprehensive financial impact study regarding a ballot measure that would commercialize marijuana. Citizens should have a thorough understanding of the professional monetary rate and staff and law enforcement time and resources and the cost to surrounding businesses and residences in quality of life and property. Marijuana businesses, whether it's sales, cultivation, or manufacturing, require an inordinate amount of city resources to process, to permit, to examine, to inventory, monitor, and to enforce. so that these citizens and their neighborhoods are protected from loitering, robberies, assaults, mismanagement of product and money, stealing, and diversion to those under 21. Also, I think the suggested taxes are too low based on my professional experience, because even if you should receive tax money from these enterprises, it will never compensate for the expenses to your law enforcement or city staff, and most importantly, the cost to the parents of Vista. I don't think the schools, youth programs, sports teams, musical venues, and families are the winners in this deal to bring marijuana businesses to town. Only out-of-towners who will aggressively knock on your door to sell and produce pot in your city because there's always money in drugs. I noticed in the initiative that the cannabis business tax is for, quote, general governmental purposes, unquote, which is not too specific. Further, the wording on the ballot says, quote, funding fire, paramedic, police protection, youth programs, parks, recreation, close quote, as if to immediately appeal to the public from line one as they make their decision. Sadly, these are the areas that I feel will be tested most by this initiative and ultimately cost the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Erica Leary, followed by Kirk Cumming, followed by Karina Contreras.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Erica Leary. I'm the Program Manager for the North Coastal Prevention Coalition, whose mission is to reduce the harm of alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, and other drugs in the cities of Carlsbad, Oceanside, and Vista through community action, education, support, and collaboration. I've spoken to you many times before, so this evening I just thought I would remind you that back in 2012, Vista did add a health element to the general plan when you updated that. Granted, back in 2012, we didn't realize the state that we would find ourselves in regards to marijuana policy. But the health element does include the statement that a healthy community includes those elements that enable people to maintain a high quality of life and productivity. At the local level, many of those elements may be influenced by policies and decisions that can have both a direct and indirect impact on the quality of a community's built, natural, and social environments, which influence the opportunities for residents to make appropriate choices for good health. In California, the social experiment regarding marijuana is in uncharted territory with many competing interests. The impact on our long-term health remains to be seen. Let's not forget that the tobacco industry claimed health benefits for us back in the 50s, and the pharmaceutical industry claimed that the newly formulated opioids were not addictive less than 20 years ago. 2/3 of California cities continue to have bans on marijuana businesses, including all North County cities, at least so far. And whatever you decide this evening, I hope that you can help inform the residents of Vista that marijuana that they might get from state licensed businesses, whether here in Vista or in San Diego or other cities, is an unapproved drug with no FDA approval and no safe dosing guidelines. And I'd like to end with another quick question to follow up on Councilman Green's question, because I'm a little confused. If you propose a new initiative on the ballot, but the existing citizens initiative gets more votes, but the tax initiative gets 50+1, or however that's done, %, does the new tax initiative apply to the citizens initiative, or is it only the 7% that's written into that initiative? Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Kirk Cumming, followed by Karina Contreras.
Thank you, Mayor Ritter. My name is Kirk Cumming. I'm a citizen of Vista, property owner. I've lived here for years. I'm just one voice that would like to stand up tonight and voice my opposition to allowing marijuana storefronts in Vista. I think there's a lot of good reasons why this is a bad idea. Moreover, I would just like to emphasize that when I think of Vista and the kind of town it is, I like to think that people would walk away from a visit here maybe feeling like Vista was a place where family could be welcomed, which is not to say that marijuana users don't like family, but I'm just saying that I would really like for Vista to convey a more wholesome family environment, a place where healthy lifestyles are chosen. I think it's pretty obvious to me of some of the bad reasons why we would not want storefront marijuana stores in Vista, is because it often invites graffiti. I'm sure that probably the guys that are spray painting all the graffiti all over the place probably like to smoke marijuana. While they probably don't get their marijuana at dispensaries, it just goes hand in hand with everything that I think that Vista should stand against. And I think Vista, you know, with its long heritage of agricultural businesses and farms, I think that it's got a lot of proud points to stand upon rather than inviting marijuana storefronts. Now, I think that it's quite clear to even the most casual observer that these storefronts won't even bring in enough tax revenue to pay for the salary of a single sheriff. Why bother? We could do a lot more with our time to promote the type of storefronts that are going to come into Vista, which will be in congruence with the changes positively that are being made in Vista with the storefront beautifications and the property values going up. Those are good things. And I think that we should really follow the good example that's been set by Escondido, Carlsbad, Cardiff, Encinitas to ban this. It's a good idea to not allow this and to instead invite and cultivate an environment which is going to be the type of place that you'd want to bring your kid to, and not the type of place that is associated with stoners and the type of sickly people that need marijuana, which, by the way, we all know it's very easy to get these cards. You can go into a dispensary and say, ow, and they'll give you a card. So I hope that you'll feel the same way that I do and think about that when you're making your decisions.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Karina?
Hello. My name is Karina Contreras, and I actually want to agree with a lot of points that have been made. That I do, like a lot of people here, have the concern that our crime rates are going to go up, that we're going to have a lot of issues moving forward if we do not create a proper regulatory framework that has real teeth to shut down the dispensaries that are operating outside of that legal framework. You know, I've asked this question so many times, I've never gotten an answer. Maybe you will please me today by giving an answer, but I want to know how many of you have ever been into a dispensary, perhaps even just in the lobby. I think that's really important. If you've never been to one, that should be the first research, okay, point of research. Now, there has been a lot of research done. You can just Google search. There's actually some academic journals that do show a correlation between legalized marijuana and the decrease in crime. Now, I was just at a traffic safety meeting that South Vista Communities had, and there was a question posed as to whether or not there have been an increase in DUIs. Now, they were talking about, you know, the increase in breweries, and interestingly enough, there has not been an increase in DUIs, so I'm assuming that that data captures also the fact that we did have dispensaries here in Vista. And let's not pat ourselves in the back that we've spent over $1 million over the last few years shutting down these dispensaries while receiving very little money in return. You know, it just does not make sense. If we want to create Vista and have a family environment, then we should probably stop accepting brewery applications, as that is the real gateway drug. I'm not going to stand up here and pretend that marijuana is like heroin, that it is like ecstasy, that it is like all these drugs that we really do not want to keep it within arm's reach of our children. You know, I think we need to be honest with kids and let them know, hey, your brain is in a very crucial state right now of development, and you should not be seeking any kind of alternative medications or any kind of medication that would alter that really fragile brain chemistry. But let's not pretend that marijuana is some evil thing. I'd like to know from any report that you guys have how many people have died from marijuana. There's probably not a dosage that has come up where people are like, oh, there's, no dosage requirement or whatever. It's because no one's ever died of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one other speaker, Brandy Clayton.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Brandy Clayton. I'm a citizen here in Vista. And I didn't plan on speaking, but I had to. My father has multiple sclerosis. My mother is an educator in Arizona. We lived in Arizona. She has 5 children. All of us have graduated from college. None of us have ever been arrested. We are not a criminal element. We have no criminal background. My mother was afraid and unable to get medicinal marijuana in Arizona for a very long time. Finally, it became available. And this December, as a family, we went, like Contreras asked, into a medicinal facility for the first time. None of us had ever been there. And we got him his first dose of medicinal marijuana. And for the first time in over 10 years, my father was able to sleep for 8 hours straight. And that meant my mother was able to sleep for the first time in 10 years for 8 hours straight. His pain was diminished. The next morning, he spoke to us in a coherent manner that he hasn't been able to do in years. And it really hurts me that people are saying the things that they are saying when this young gentleman over here needs medicinal marijuana. And there are people who have epilepsy, and it does treat these things, and to call them criminals and to act like we're asking for these things because we want to ruin the foundations of family. My family has a very strong foundation. We have never done any of the things that these people have said marijuana brings. And if we really want to talk about a drug problem, your kids have more access to opioids and easier access to that than they do to marijuana. So if you are really concerned about your children, let's talk about that and what's in your medicine cabinet, because that's what you need to be afraid of, not marijuana. And I think we really need to take a look at what the medicinal purposes of marijuana will do for the gentleman here and for my father, and you really need to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, that is our last speaker. So I would just say to all of you what you wanted about the other cities. The other cities don't have an initiative already on the ballot, which we have in Vista, which would put 11 dispensaries in our city. And so that's the reason that we're having this conversation. So I guess I will start with Councilmember Franklin.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that question or that comment you just made, Madam Mayor. How many cities in the county have had a qualified initiative that went to the voters? Is it 2?
So I believe that La Mesa and Lemon Grove had initiatives passed in 2016, as did the city of San Diego. I am not aware, outside of, I believe, possibly the city of Oceanside, of what's potentially on the ballot for 2018.
Were there any cities in the county that had a qualified initiative that went to the ballot that failed?
Not in San Diego County. Oh, Encinitas.
Encinitas.
Excuse me, Encinitas.
So that's incredibly instructive, the fact that we find ourselves in a situation that is so different than all the other cities. We don't have the luxury of choosing not to deal with this because we have a qualified initiative on the ballot in November. This issue is before voters in Vista, and nothing that we can do can change that. And the fact that it succeeded everywhere except one of the cities with property values far exceeding average property values, far exceeding our own, Not surprising that the homeowners and voters of Encinitas, who probably feel differently at a whole about access, not surprising they did what they did. Since I have the floor, I just like to say I think all of us, I know I've been with several of my colleagues, but I think almost all of us have been to dispensaries. I went at my favorite time of the day to a medical dispensary, which is just after the sheriff deputies have arrested all the illegal operators. I appreciate all the good work that they do to punish and bring to justice those who violate our laws and disturb the standards of our community. I wish I had a blow-up of some of the photographs. I could show them to you. I'm going to pass these around because I know the council like to see these again when we talk about this. But the blackout brownie that has 1,000 milligrams, meant to be shared by 20 people. We have about 4 overdoses a day that are treated at Tri-City Hospital that are serious enough to require hospitalization. This, if you can get a picture of this here, this is the candy store. When you go in there, I think it was kind of interesting what Deputy Mayor Aguilera proposed, and I ultimately agree with, that we ban the marketing of these items that are clearly intended for children. And you see here that this is the array of product offering: hard candies, lollipops, gummy bears, brownies, all kinds of items that were intended to attract children and youthful customers. And I mean, this clearly is not the kind of thing that we want ever in our community. There is no question about that. I have to say I'm disturbed by the revenue estimates. I mean, if it's going to be forced upon us, some revenue is better than none. However, you know, we just raised $1 million in fees for people that are doing good things in Vista, who are building homes and developments and office properties and other things that make our economy work. And we raised $1 million worth of fees so that we could recover the full costs of our staff time spent on those projects, which was fair. We want the developers to pay the cost of the work that they create for the city. But here we have a situation very much where we could find ourselves in a situation where the taxes that we collect are nowhere near adequate for the basic regulation. We had originally started out talking about a per square foot tax, and the staff has brought us a percentage tax. My concern about that is, as one of the speakers brought up tonight, we're not going to have forensic accountants, so we're not going to hire 3 new staff here at City Hall to go through people's sales tax receipts and find out how much they really sold. So I just think enforcement is really going to be a problem with that. I like the square footage assessments better, and I think those make more sense, although I don't know if we're too far afield now to go back to those. You asked for guidance with regard to binding the City Council. Mr. Piper, I would like the language to essentially say that at no time before what did you suggest, 2020? I would say at no time prior to 2020 shall the council increase shall they decrease, rather. At no time prior to 2020 shall they decrease, and then leave the language fixed. And if the voters desire more, then we could certainly go through that process again. Am I making myself clear there? In other words, the council would be bound by the action of the initiative not to have the authority to increase the number of stores. Does that make sense? So in other words, they'd have the authority after 2020 to decrease the number, but would not have authority under the initiative to increase the number.
I think I understand what you're saying. As currently written, there was no increase prior to 2020, and I believe what you're suggesting is that there should be no increase after 2020 either.
And the authority for the council to act outside the, I mean, if we're going to do this by will of the voters, then that should tie the hands of the council. In regard to canopy space, for those of you who have been in some of our businesses in the business park, lots of good business owners have utilized their floor space, which is very expensive, by building rack systems which allow them to stack goods and materials maybe as high as 20 feet. So my question, since we are going to go ahead and tax on canopy space, what about a grower that has 20,000 actual square feet of concrete in their warehouse, but they install racks and they're able to double the square footage that's grown? If I can tier and build a mezzanine level, do I have to pay for that additional mezzanine capacity?
The state regulations attempt to take that in consideration.
They do.
They have extensive definition of canopy space.
Okay. All right. I like the idea generally that the gentleman brought up about doing a cost analysis. I think we know that the costs of this are going to be extreme. They're going to be well into the seven figures. The revenues will not cover them. And I feel strongly that those who don't share my belief on this subject would never take seriously any amount of scholarly work that we did to estimate the cost impacts, and therefore I'm not sure that it would be an effective use of funds to change any minds. Those are the thoughts that I have right now.
You all set? Oh, okay. Deputy Mayor.
I'm going to pass on my question right now. I'm good right now. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Rigby?
I didn't even need to press my button.
I saw you getting ready to push your button.
I want to follow up on the question from Councilman Franklin, because he asked about racks being used to double or triple the canopy space. And I think you said that the state has extensive definition of what canopy space is identified as. And so I'm understanding that response to be that we cannot define it ourselves. We cannot add to it or detract from it, that it is what it is.
No, that's not what I was saying. I was saying that we are using the state's definition of canopy space.
So did that
it's a technical
include
issue.
So what would be the answer to his question if they did racks, thus doubling or tripling their floor space? What is the answer to that question?
The answer is all of it would be counted.
Okay.
However, if you have looked at photos of growing space, the plants grow very, very tall in that environment. So it would be
So there
a
wouldn't be
challenge,
racks
certainly.
and racks and racks of
It
these?
could not be
Okay. So, but
that high.
no, I haven't seen a grower space. It's very sad that our community is being subjected to this ballot measure. I still stand firmly in my opposition to the stores in Vista. And I have been inside a dispensary, and I know that we have been told repeatedly that there's no marketing to children. But that's not what I saw there. I saw so many things that were marketed to children that were obviously designed to attract kids. And that was very distressing for me. Like I said, I still stand very opposed to even the city's ordinance that we are drafting. I voted against it before, and I still stand opposed to that. And I stand opposed to the ordinance that's going to be on the ballot in November. It's a badly written ordinance that will be bad for our community. And I think that we could do better to defeat that rather than add another ordinance onto the ballot.
Councilmember Green.
All right, so I wrote down a lot while people were speaking. The first thing that I wanted to clarify was the intent of hiring the consultant to do the poll. We did spend $35,000 hiring a consultant to do a public opinion poll, and that the intent of that was to find out what the community wanted before we kind of moved forward. The community did overwhelmingly say that they thought safe, reliable access was a big deal, which is why we are where we are right now. So the other thing that was on there did indicate that if we put a competing measure on the ballot, that both measures could in fact fail. Initially, I was extremely opposed to putting any type of competing measure against strictly because of that. However, after looking at how the Citizens Initiative was crafted, there are a lot of holes in the Citizens Initiative. I think my attorney spoke a little bit about how the taxation was one sentence. The other thing is the parking requirements, as well as the law enforcement requirements that are on the current Citizens Initiative. So I do think we need to come up with something. We can come up with something better. I don't think we're doing a disservice to our community by coming up with something better, but I would like to come up with something that we can actually support. The initiative that's before us today, I definitely have some questions on as far as the competing initiative. The first question that I had is, it looks like the map has changed dramatically from when we were initially speaking. There were a lot of different areas around Vista that would be acceptable for cannabis businesses, and it looks like now we're down to just one little area in the entire city. Is that correct?
We are down to one area. It is not particularly little, given that it's most of the business park. That comes about largely as a result of not allowing cannabis businesses in the commercial zone.
So did we add additional what we called sensitive use areas to this
No,
new
we did
map?
not add any sensitive uses.
I would clarify that we received council direction to put a 500-foot buffer around residential zones, which basically precludes more properties in the city than you probably saw in an earlier map when we were just identifying sensitive uses. But the city council said put a 500-foot setback from residential, and that constricts the available space.
So we are down to where we're trying to concentrate it to one particular area in the city with our new, I mean, my question is that map, regardless of whether the Citizens Initiative passes or not, is that map what we're stuck with, or is there a way to look at that map? It just doesn't sound like
That map relates to what the city attorney has proposed for this initiative. From the
competing
city.
initiative, per se.
The qualified initiative has some minimal state required buffer, sensitive
which would
use
be
buffers.
more in line with the other map that we were reviewing.
It's much more liberal than our map. It was significantly higher. You could have, it would have been a lot bigger. But
so our initial map was kind of a happy medium, but right now we're
it was definitely in between.
We're on the other side, the real
correct
strict side. Okay, let's see. And the other question I had was on one of the pages you said draft cannabis business ordinance authorizes 2 micro businesses, but they must also hold 3 of the following licenses. My question for you is, if they're a type 12 business, do they have to hold 3 additional licenses in addition to that license plus a type 10 license? And then what are it sounds like it's like 4 different licenses, and what are the costs? And
Actually is 4 different licenses.
It is 4 different licenses.
That's the way the state has put the program together. You get your type 12 license, you must have 3 other licenses, and you have to comply with all of the regulatory requirements for each of those 3 other licenses. As we mentioned the last time, that is a considerable, could be a considerable challenge to someone who wants to be a microbusiness because there are a lot of regulations involved. As you can see here, you have to have either a type retail 9 or 10. In Vista, it would have to be a 10 because microbusiness is tied to the type 10 retail walk-in store license. It wouldn't, I mean, a type 10, the type 9 licensees, the delivery only could choose to be a microbusiness, but they're not required to be that way. And then you have at least 2 of the other licenses to obtain. So
on the citizens initiative that indicates there's going to be 11 storefronts, would they all be considered a type 12 business and have to get all of these licenses, or does their initiative not require all of these additional licenses? Sounds like it's a state thing, right?
It could all be type 10 storefronts.
Okay, so they're all going to be susceptible to the same licensing process regardless.
Right. There would be no requirement for them to be a microbusiness. Some might choose to be a non-storefront delivery only, but they're all permitted to be type 10s.
Also, I just want to make sure that the community knows that we definitely do know there's a need for this. It's not just the stoners and sickly people and criminals. There are a lot of people in our town that need medical marijuana, and I want to fight hard to make sure that we provide safe, reliable access and some type of policy that will benefit our city, not hinder our city. So that's all I got for right now. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay. Sorry, Daryl, but I found a mistake in your numbers.
Go right ahead.
The annual tax you have, I guess, which is accurate, we're collecting $73,000, which is at 1% sales tax, is equivalent to gross sales of $730. Should be $7.3 million.
Oh.
So perhaps
multiply those by 10 then.
Yeah. Perhaps if we look at the tax numbers, we'll come up with some quite different numbers altogether, especially if our tax is a 5 or 7% tax. Then I think, because if you extrapolate the just add a 0 to the 2.9, you're talking about 29 million, right, in gross sales?
Yes.
If we tax that at 5 to 7%, I didn't run those numbers, but I'm thinking it's about $1.5 million.
A quick way to look at it, as I don't know exactly how the delivery would be, how we would be enforcing that tax, but looking at the 2 retail storefronts, that 73,000, which is 1%, would be about 365 at 5%, which is where the ordinance is set, so about 730. It's actually similar numbers, which is probably where we got a little bit confused in our math. But
this says equivalent gross sales from the store of 730, and I think that's why.
Correct. It should be 7.
The attorney had some questions about the validity of that number. So I think you're right, Daryl. The number is a lot bigger. So I would say that we'd probably collect closer to $1 million, if not $1.5 million.
A conservative estimate could probably be about 750,000.
Okay, that's fine. So, as Councilman Franklin mentioned earlier, we are at the point where we already have an initiative that is going to be considered in November. And I personally don't believe it's a good one. And I believe that the people of Vista deserve a choice. And something that's, the problems I had with the initial initiative is they take a lot of the control away from the city, from our code enforcement. They're basically trying to change the laws. They don't have the same regulations that even some of our alcohol businesses have. And I just don't think that's good. So I think that we are obligated to put a better option on the table. And perhaps the end result is that neither one is adopted. But I feel like we have the obligation to make an effort to improve on this. In the city, in our code enforcement, and our attorney still need to be in control through ordinance of how any business functions in our city. And as far as the Type 12 and all that, it doesn't, to me, now that I'm more informed on it, to me it doesn't sound like a good option anymore. I mean, I just don't think it's going to work. I think we just need to get down to, we're going to have 2 to 3 delivery services, or we're going to have 2 delivery, 2 storefronts, and that's it, and just leave it at that. I think that's my opinion and how this should be handled. And I think the map works well because from talking to people in the community, people don't want any of these stores near their residents. And I know some business owners definitely don't want it near their businesses as well. So I think that's probably one of the biggest concerns for most people, is just having those stores nearby. So I'm starting to lean towards, why don't we just look at 2 to 3 delivery services and leave it at that, put it on the ballot, let the citizens decide if A works for them or B works for them, or maybe in the end C works for them, you know, and just let the people decide.
I guess I'll jump in because I pretty much agree with you, except because I think that Type 12 is so complicated. It just makes everything really complicated. So I would go with the storefront, but I want medicinal storefront only. I kind of like where they put in here that prohibits packaging geared towards children. I like the measures, the buffer distances. I put that in there. Uses city proposed sensitive use list and buffer zones. I think we should leave those in there. I don't have a problem with like testing and research labs. That's kind of more like a business, I would think, rather than, but I don't want our business park to become like, Cannabis Park or something. They have all sorts of things out there. So, but I would go with, and I'm not sure the difference. What is manufacture? What do they do in manufacturing? What exactly is that?
That's making anything that isn't the base product. That's oils, that is food products.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of need for the oils. I talk to people that use a lot of those. So I don't have a problem. I really don't like any of it, but I know that there's a need for medicine or medical. So I feel like we should fill that need in our city. So I don't have a problem with the testing and research labs of the manufacturers, but and the delivery only, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think I'd like to do the indoor cultivators. I don't think I would do that. I think I would go with just the storefront, the delivery, and the other ones out here, and the manufacturers, the testing, and those other rules. So that's kind of where I stand. But when people signed that, I think when people signed that initiative, they didn't think about where they can be located. I don't want to see our downtown have dispensaries in our downtown. We've worked so hard to make our downtown nice, and I don't want to see dispensaries all over town. And I think when they had that initiative out there, they had something about keep your kids safe, or maybe Amanda remembers what it was on the. Remember when they had the initiative out there? It was something about
keep the community safe.
Keeping your community safe, or keeping your kids safe, or protecting kids, and which had nothing to do with the marijuana with people's signs. So anyway, that's kind of where I stand. So I see I have lights on again. So Councilmember Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I said, I still stand absolutely firmly opposed to this, but we are faced with it nonetheless. So if we are going to be doing this, I still want my thoughts on the record for what it is that we're going to be discussing or perhaps putting out there as a city, because I think that as some of the comments were made from the public, what we do as a city council reflects on the direction that we want our city to go, and it reflects on what we want as a city council. And do we want retail marijuana stores throughout our city? Is that the kind of message that we're sending to our community? Now, I think not. And I think that as a council, we need to be careful what we put out there to our community about what we're doing. And I think the measure that's qualified has some serious flaws in it, very serious flaws in it. And one of them is where it talks about no enforcement. If they are licensed, there are no enforcement allowed and no city council oversight of their businesses. And that's very disturbing to me because there are issues that perhaps they are out of compliance on. And we have to be able to deal with those issues. One of the things that has come up, not just tonight, but previously, is about the amount of energy that it takes to grow these plants. And some of the businesses have been very creative in getting their power to do these things. That would be something that we would need to have enforcement on. There are other things that we would need to have enforcement on, and my question is, on their initiative, do they go through line item by line item on what they're not going to accept enforcement on? Or has it just been open-ended with no council oversight and no enforcement?
It's relatively open-ended. What it says is that the best tool we've had for enforcement, which has been criminal prosecution, doesn't apply once they have a license. Then you're stuck with civil remedies, which can take years to play out.
Right. But if they were to have other, not necessarily that business product issue, we still could enforce whatever needed to be brought back into compliance if they were out of compliance with anything else. Now, I've talked to some of them, and they think, no, that once this goes through, they're completely under the radar from the city, and that's not what I want for my city. It doesn't mean they have carte blanche to be creative in the way that they provide their service or the way that they get their power or the way they conduct their business. So that's an issue for me on that particular measure. As far as the Type 12 licenses go, I know that it has to be, a Type 12 has to have 3 of the following licenses: a retail, cultivation, distribution, or manufacturing. Now, if we were to require the Type 12, and I'm not convinced we are or that we should, but my question is, can we as a city say the 3 that we want you to have and the retail is one that we don't want? Because I don't want to see any retail.
Yes, you could say that, which means you would effectively be applying the Type 12 to the delivery-only option.
Okay. And like many people here, I know people who are using medicinal marijuana for different reasons, and I don't have a problem with that. They have their recommendations from their physicians. And these are physicians not found on the internet. These are physicians at, hospitals and like at Scripps. I know people at Scripps who have recommendations from the doctors there. So I understand the need for this, but we have to balance the need for that with the needs of our community and the public safety of our community. So I am not opposed to delivery only. And did I hear in the last week or so that there was a court case regarding delivery through cities? Was there a recent court case that was handed down on that?
If there was, I'm not aware of what you're looking at within the last week. I think I've seen every case that's come down in the last week.
Okay.
Now, by statute, we cannot interfere with delivery through the city.
Okay.
So people who are transporting with a license are free to go through our city irrespective of our regulations. Okay. There has been a state bill introduced that would prohibit us from prohibiting delivery from a licensed dispensary outside the city. And to be honest, I do not know the status of that bill.
Okay. So if a business was licensed in some other city to do delivery, they could do deliveries in Vista or through Vista on their way to San Marcos or Escondido with no hindrance from us, correct?
Correct. On the transit, we could prohibit delivery in the city, which we currently do, but we could also permit it. And as I said, state law may change so that we didn't have the power to prohibit it.
Right, and that was going to be my other comment, because in different meetings in Sacramento, we talk about, at the Rev and Tax meeting, we talk about the anticipated income from the pot businesses and the taxation of it. And one of the speakers that spoke to us earlier this year talked about, because of Prop 64 allowing recreational pot, which was the personal six-plant thing as was discussed earlier, the state is looking at unwinding all of the medical marijuana laws because it has become quite complicated and somewhat convoluted. So some of this might be moot at some point. I don't know. We'll have to see how that plays out. But I would be sternly opposed to retail storefronts. I don't want storefronts, but I'm okay with delivery. And if it goes through with storefronts, definitely no packaging to kids. What I saw in that dispensary to me was distressing, as I said. There was no question that that was marketed. That's what I don't understand. To say that they're not marketing to kids, and yet it was so clearly appealing to children. And if it's not marketed to them, who is that particular, those products, there were a lot of them, who is the target audience for that? But I would have to agree with my colleagues on that one. You know, it can't be toys and things like that they're marketing to the children. And I do agree with safe and reliable access, and I know that's the buzz phrase that we're all working with, and we all want that. But we have to define what safe access is in our community, and I think it is incumbent upon us to do that. So I am still opposed to putting our own initiative on the ballot, but if we are, those would be the parameters I would like to see. Thank you.
Councilmember Franklin.
Councilwoman Rigby, would there be any way that you would see to vote for an alternative that was delivery only? Would that be something that you might be able to support? So you would vote tonight to approve an alternative offered by the council that would allow delivery only?
It depends on what else is in there.
Fair enough. I would love for us to be able to do something unanimously that the entire council supports, so that we are of a like voice to the community. I believe I heard the deputy mayor say that what he's, through his thought process, settled on is that he is in fact in favor of a deliver-only alternative. This is kind of where I started this whole conversation, and despite what anybody thinks, I have pursued this conversation with an open mind, have said in every conversation that I oppose retail storefronts in our community, and I have said repeatedly that I am not a pharmacologist, not a doctor. I don't understand the pharmacological efficacy of drugs. It's not why you elected me to make prognostications about whether drugs are necessary or effective. I have no opinion on that subject. That's for public consumption, because that's not what you hired me to do. So I don't have an opinion on that publicly. There clearly are people in our community, perhaps a majority, that believe strongly that access to medical marijuana is necessary. I just want to offer that if there were a way to craft an initiative that we could all support, an alternative that we could all support that would pass unanimously through this council, that I will sit here all night hashing out the details if we can get there. because I would like to be of one voice, not a divided voice to the community. I would like people to know clearly what our goals are, and I see offering regulated delivery only as being a way that we do welcome safe legal access. These businesses right now are having difficulty finding legal places to operate. One of my own constituents who does not currently but has the intent and desire to operate a delivery-only business has approached me, spoken before us on numerous occasions, and has urged me to consider this option. And the more I think about it and realize that, delivery is already available, and that any person could, from somebody that's not licensed or permitted to deliver could already get it via delivery. So what we're really doing is we're making a safe environment for some number of business owners to have a place of business in our city to conduct this delivery-only operation. It's what's perhaps good about a compromise like this is I don't think any of us are happy with it. It's not accomplishing all of what some would want, and it's accomplishing more than others want. So that's where I'm at right now. I'd really like to hear from my colleagues and see if there's any way we could come to an agreement on that.
I just would jump in. I'd say my only concern about that is because I don't want it either anyway. But I feel like because we have the one initiative, we have to do something. But it has to be something that is substantial. I mean, delivery only. Then you have delivery only, or do we want 11 dispensaries? Well, the people, almost 60% that supported the marijuana, would that be enough for them to vote for? Or are they still going to pass the one that says I want, the dispensaries? So that's my only thought. I mean, I don't want them either, but I'm trying to get a happy medium and make it a better bill so that. And I know we don't agree with that, but just a better bill so that at least it has a chance of passing. This one rather than that one. That's my thought about it. So I'll go to Councilmember Green.
I was just going to say that I unfortunately won't unanimously support a bill that doesn't have any storefronts. I think there needs to be storefronts. I also don't like the fact that the map was cut down to just one particular area, quite frankly. I think the other map that had more areas that kind of spaced it out, around our districts, around our city, that provided better access. And I know that, you guys have constantly said we don't want to have marijuana throughout our city. And I think having, 4 dispensaries that all deliver, or, that would be my, we have 4 total. They all get to deliver instead of two storefronts. But, I think that what we got to look at is we're not really flooding our city with that. We have a lot of other businesses that are all over our city. We have a lot of, we have 9 Starbucks, 14 storage facilities, 19 car washes. Who knows how many liquor stores? Who knows how many breweries? I think putting 4 medical marijuana facilities that are all paying taxes to our city, that are going to give us good tax dollars, that would allow us to hire more deputies, that would allow us to hire more park rangers, that would allow us to balance the fees of combating the illegal dispensaries, is something that we should definitely look at. So I know I'm probably on the losing end of this one, but I definitely, unfortunately, will not unanimously pass just having delivery. I think that if we don't address the cultivation, the manufacturing, the testing, like Mayor Ritter said, we really need to have some teeth to this. And if it's not going to be a good alternative, it's not something that I'm going to support, because I don't want both of them to fail, because I do think that the citizens want some action. And if they both fail and we maintain the status quo, we've wasted a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of money doing absolutely nothing for our citizens, and inevitably not giving them what they want. So that's my direction for you. I know we're not actually voting on anything tonight, but I'd like to have something with all aspects. I think the 2 cultivation, 2 testing, 2 manufacturing is fine, but I would be more of a 4 storefront, more spaced out than just, I don't want to have the weed corridor of Vista that is in that little bitty area. You say it's as big as you want. I know how big the industrial area of our city is. I know the zip code it's in. I know where it's located. It is one area in our city. And I personally don't want that. So that's me, and that's it.
Councilmember Rigby, back to you.
I'll save my comment for later.
Well, there's nobody else that wants to make any comments, apparently. Excuse me, you can't talk from the audience. Councilmember Franklin, and then
Wouldn't you say the deadline was to place something on the ballot?
The deadline, I believe, well,
When does this council need to take action in order for it to?
the very last time for a regular meeting of this council is June 26, when we will not have a full council. The next full council is on June 12. Otherwise, special meetings would be required either in June or in July in order to get something on the ballot in early August, because our first meeting in August is after the cutoff date for putting anything on the ballot.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, too, that Mr. Piper asked us for direction on whether or not we'd want to include language about allowing the city council to change the number of businesses authorized under the alternative as part of the initiative language. And I think I'm the only one that gave him feedback on that so far. So I think you need to hear from the rest of us on that question. Am I correct?
Well, there are actually a number of questions, and I think some of them are different now than when we began.
Right.
First, my impression is that there is a majority, if not a consensus, for abandoning Type 12 licenses as a requirement and going to 2, 3, 4, some number of Type 9 delivery-only licenses with no Type 10 retail dispensary licenses. Councilman Green obviously is not in agreement with that, but I think I heard the rest of you say something along those lines. So I'd like to know if that is indeed the direction. If it is, we'll remove the Type 10s from the ordinance and put the number of Type 9 delivery-onlys in that the council chooses to have.
I want to speak to that again for a moment.
Can I just say one
go
thing?
ahead.
Can I? The fellow that stood up in the back that wanted to talk, maybe he has a solution. So if you fill out a speaker slip, we will let you talk.
With regard to the
Maybe he has an answer.
with regard to the storefronts, I would like to see us use the Type 12 designation. I don't think that requiring a more diligent process to determine who can be a storefront operator would be, and essentially that's what it is. It's requiring a greater level of diligence on behalf of the business owner, and it is a slightly higher burden. I'd like to see somebody who can navigate the state's regulatory environment, who demonstrates that they're a good business operator, if we decide to go forward with storefronts. However, it sounds like, and I would not be totally happy, but I might be satisfied enough if 4 of us could agree on the storefront only idea. And Madam Mayor, I wrestle with the same question that you do, but I also am. I'm moved by this idea that the community is going to believe that we have a different point of view than we really do, and I lament that. The other side of me says, it doesn't matter what the perspective is and how people view what we do. We just have to do the right thing, and I really am struggling with exactly what the right thing is on this particular policy. But if what we're really talking about here is making sure that people who are in genuine need receive what they need for medical purposes, then I guess I can't understand how the delivery option doesn't satisfy their need. Today with the internet, you can examine visually, thousands of products in a catalog, and certainly the delivery personnel could bring samples of different things if the purchaser needed to, sample the different items. I mean, when you go to the doctor, they give you samples of prescription drugs to see which might have the least side effects and the greatest beneficial effects for you. So I don't know if I see any reason why that wouldn't work. And I could see your concern, and I share it, that maybe it's not enough to attract those folks who are of conscience about providing access. But that's a fine line that we're going to have to walk, and maybe without knowing for sure. But I feel like if we could get to a place where 4 of us agree, then wishing I could get Councilman Green to agree with us, but understanding that that's probably not going to be possible. I would just so like to present a unified front to the community so that they know that we've come to the best conclusion that we can as a group.
Councilmember Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I said earlier, in previous meetings that I've had, the state legislators are looking at unwinding a lot of the medicinal marijuana laws because of the recreational proposition. I'm going back to Sacramento on Thursday of next week, and will hopefully be updated because the legislative session, I think their deadline for getting this year's bills put through is passed. So we're going to be getting updated on all the new bills. So I'll know what's going to be considered. Since it sounded like we have a little bit of time before this is absolutely necessary to be done, is it possible for us to have this discussion? I'd like to know what Sacramento is going to do before we finalize anything here, I guess is my question. Can we do that?
I think it depends on what your definition of what Sacramento is going to do is. So, yes, the deadline is passed for bills to be introduced. They have other deadlines in terms of getting through committees and getting across houses.
Right.
But the end of the session isn't until, I believe, the end of August, and then the governor has 30 days to act on the bills. That would definitely preclude the city council from putting anything on the ballot for November. The June, that would be at the pleasure of the city council and the determination of the city attorney and staff about how much time we need to answer your questions and prepare more information. A meeting at the end of next week, I don't know that would be as much of an issue, but getting through the true amount of finality from Sacramento would be too far out.
No, I recognize that. I'm familiar with the process. My point was knowing what has been proposed and what has support up there, because that's something that I would be looking to find out. Now, naturally, we'd have, like you said, it's going to be months before the finalization of anything. But if the things are done and going to be working through the process that they had said that they anticipate happening, could be significant just in that they're going to be discussing these particular things. So I just, the timing is unfortunate for this because it seems like a lot of time and energy for us to sit here and talk about regulating medicinal marijuana when the state is looking at unwinding all of it. And so a year from now, this could be a moot point. But that was just my question on that. I'm still opposed to having any storefronts on any level, but delivery I can talk about.
So do you want to hear what this guy's? So Kirk, where's Kirk? But be brief, okay? Because time's.
I don't know that I necessarily have a solution, but there was one point that I'd like to bring up that I thought was very pertinent. And Mr. Green, I'd like you to consider that these businesses and storefront marijuana businesses are often perpetrated and preyed upon by an extreme criminal element because it's a cash-only business, and the banks won't deal with these people as business folks regularly like you and I do with paper transactions and credit cards and things like that. So because these storefront people have such large quantities of cash on them, there's a lot of crimes that are perpetrated upon these people. And with the storefront as a location, you give the people that are perpetrating these crimes against these business owners a location to go to, pay attention to, stalk, and therefore maybe perpetrate a crime of stealing the revenue generated by these businesses. Furthermore, if we had only a business that did delivery, you would not only protect the anonymity of the business owner, but you would also protect the complete anonymity of the user. And while I recognize that it's really important these people have their medicine, just like anybody needs any medicine, I also recognize the potential danger that these business owners face with trying to protect their assets and the money that they've raised. So I would caution you and encourage you to opt for a delivery-only business.
Thank you, sir. My only concern with the delivery only is I think that in a dispensary, there are people who are qualified to tell them about the different, I don't know because I've never been there, but oils and, how they just, whatever you need for whatever ailment you have, like doctors know. I would think that the people in dispensaries have a knowledge of that, where a delivery person may not. They just would deliver the thing. That's my only thing I have to, and I'm not for dispensaries. I'm just keep thinking out loud here. So, Deputy Mayor.
Well, I think, yes.
Mayor, may I clarify something?
Yeah.
The delivery person only brings what is ordered. Right. So the delivery person has nothing to do with explaining the benefits of any of the products. Those are done directly with the delivery company and whoever they have on staff to assist someone on the phone or through the internet. So it's not a question of the delivery person not being qualified. You can have the same level of qualifications. They're simply not across the counter.
But yeah, so a person can't go in across the counter and say, help me, I need to know, I have really bad headaches, what should I?
You would do that
over the phone
with the business on the phone or by email or most likely over the internet.
Okay. So Deputy Mayor, sorry.
Well, you stole my thunder. No, it's a good point. It's just, with the advent of the internet, I mean, it's been out forever, right, at this point. But with the internet, obviously phones, you can call in, you can get whatever information you need. And like when I order something, I'm not listening to the guy at Best Buy who's, sometimes I do, but I mean, sometimes they're not the most qualified, or the guy at other stores. I just won't mention any stores because I don't want to offend anybody. But, I mean, we all do our own research today. And if you do have questions, I'm assuming that they would have qualified individuals that could answer those questions. But I think the real concern for most of the community, the side of the community that does oppose this, is they don't want to see it in their neighborhood. They don't want to see the storefronts.
True.
So I think this is, as Mr. Franklin said, Councilman Franklin, this is a good compromise where nobody's really satisfied or happy, I should say, but because nobody's necessarily winning all the way. But we do need to find a solution. There's an initiative already on the ballot that we need to give people the option or the ability to make a decision for themselves. And I believe that the voters of Vista will make the right decision. We just need to give them that opportunity. So I think we need to craft something that's quality, that meets their needs. I think 3 delivery the type 9 licenses, the same map we're discussing right now. I'm okay with allowing for testing and even manufacturing if we want to go there. I could take or leave that. But I think we need to do something. We can't keep delaying, and I mean things are always going to change. I mean, I can remember when the speed limit was 55. Well, I remember it was 60 or 65. Now it's in some spots it's 70.
Yeah, who goes 65?
So, laws are going to change. We need us to step up, make a decision, and if laws change in the future, I'm assuming our city attorney has the ability to craft language in there that will allow for some of those state law changes.
That language is in both initiatives.
Great.
So
we're
this
set.
a delivery would not provide sales tax then, right? Is that right?
If they're, yeah, no, they would.
It does?
Yeah.
It does?
By permitting the non-retail storefront, we would be able to collect sales tax based on the sales that derive from that location, even though someone isn't coming to that business specifically. It's through delivery.
So would it be medical only, or it would be any kind of oils and things that are...
So that is, if you have a medical card, it wouldn't matter the type of, the product isn't what designates whether or not it's considered adult use or medicinal. The products are the same. It's just whether or not a person is, has the physician's recommendation or the county ID card that identifies it as a medical.
Okay. Okay. Councilmember Franklin.
I want to pick on realtors for 1 second because there's two of you here. I have a number of friends who are realtors. Some took the test and passed the first time. I have some other friends who've taken the test 4 times and failed every time. How many hours of study are necessary, and what kind of rigorous examination is necessary to provide advice about the consumption of medical marijuana across the counter at a type 12 or a type 10, let's just say a type 10. What kind of expertise would one need to have, and what kind of detailed examinations would they need to pass?
None.
Oh, okay. Sorry for taking the long way at making that point, but I kind of had to poke fun at that because can we have order in the chamber? Could we all be respectful of the fact that there's a process here? Okay, everybody had a chance to speak. My point is there is no education required. There is no expertise required. This is, the same person that was, selling frappes at Starbucks a week ago. Tomorrow could be your bud tender, right? So, in fact, Starbucks might have a more rigorous training program. I don't want to offend them because they probably do. It probably takes longer to be a barista on your own than it does to be a bud tender. So I don't think we can, and I would hate to make any, advance to the public that we think that anybody has any expertise when the state law doesn't require it. So I'm not sure you're really getting any better. And Mr. Piper, you said they only bring what's ordered, but they certainly could bring samples. Nothing in the law would prohibit that.
The current regulations permit them to give away free samples.
Okay, so they can bring samples either requested by the customer or that they think would be appropriate for the customer.
Yes.
Okay, so there's nothing to stop them from seeing something on the website of the purveyor and saying, I'd like to try that. Could you bring it? Or I'd like to examine it in person. Could you bring it so I could examine it? They don't have to sell all the wares that they brought to be examined at the point of sale. So it certainly would provide that opportunity for in-person examination in free samples for, sometimes I like to try 3 different flavors of ice cream before I get the right one. So they could try that. I do think it's important. I don't mean to be silly about it at all, but I did want to make the point that there is no process for education, which is sad because, to count pills at Walgreens, you have to have at least 6 years, maybe more, of education to become a pharmacologist, not a pharmacologist, a pharmacist rather, and pass a fairly rigorous examination by the state. Demonstrates the difference here. But I think it's important. We've had, 8 meetings on this subject or more? I think we should give the staff our final guidance on this evening and let them bring back the perfected form of the alternative that we intend to give an up or down vote to, because it's time. We're up against the deadline. We've discussed it 8 times, 10 times, informal. So I think we should move forward. So I'd love to hear from Councilwoman Rigby about what should be in or what should be out in order to win your support.
You guys, I have one person asked for for another speaker. Do you want to hear it? Hear one more person? This will be our last one.
Have they had an opportunity to speak yet?
No. Okay, Alexis, where are you? Keep it brief, okay? You have 3 minutes.
Hello, thank you. I'll keep it super brief. Councilmember Franklin, I just really would like to specifically address you and say that I don't think anybody in this room appreciates your condescending tone. I don't
Keep
appreciate
it positive. Keep it positive, okay?
And I don't appreciate you specifically pointing out Councilmember Green to be the hindrance.
Hey, you know what?
I'm pretty sure I'm being respectful. Am I not? And I don't appreciate you pointing at Councilmember Green saying that he's being the hindrance between you guys and your consolidated front. So if you could just maybe choose your words and tone a little wiser, it'd be appreciated. Thank you.
I don't think I was disrespectful of Councilman Green. In fact, Councilman Green and I, though we don't agree on this particular issue, we get along pretty well. And Councilman Green, did I offend you in any way?
I'm okay.
Okay, I apologize if I did. It certainly was not my intention. What I was trying to say, and I apologize that there was a misunderstanding, but I was hoping that we could achieve a 5-member agreement so that we could all move forward with the United Front. Seeing that that's not possible and understanding that, that's fine. We don't always agree, all 5 of us, but I'd like to be united if possible. I wasn't casting any aspersion on Councilman Green and his lack of agreement with my thoughts. I respect that he comes to his own point of view from a genuine place. He and I have spent more time talking about this and other subjects than maybe I've had an opportunity to spend with almost any other individual. And I deeply respect that he comes to what he believes from a sincere point of study and view. So I would appreciate that you don't try to assign any ill motives to myself that when you don't understand what my motives are.
Please be respectful. Okay.
Mayor, may I now
Yes.
inquire of the council where I think maybe my instructions are and get nods of heads or something else? I've heard dispensary only, delivery only, quantity 3. Does that, I'm counting 1, 2 nodding, 3. 4 nodding heads. Okay. Now, let me inquire, because there's been a couple of other commentaries. It wasn't clear to me that manufacturing and testing seemed to meet with approval. Cultivation, there seem to be some differences of views on whether or not we should allow cultivation. There's a no head there, and Deputy Mayor, cultivation in the business park.
It would have to be a small, is there a size to that?
Well, at the moment, it would be 2 20,000 square foot each. That's the way the ordinance exists at the moment. It's easy to remove those.
And there would be a tax on that by square footage?
$14 a square foot, escalated by CPI.
That's fine.
Oh, I have another head. I have one nodding on the end this time.
I wanted to understand what Councilwoman Rigby's pleasure was on that, because, again, I'd like to work towards the broadest consensus that we can, and that would affect what I'd be willing to support.
I am still delivery only.
I'd be for delivery only then.
Okay.
So tell me what cultivation exactly is. That's
growing
growing
the
it.
plants, that's the energy, the water, all of those issues. And that would be in the business park indoors.
Okay, I could be okay with that one.
Okay.
Because it's not a retail.
Were you okay? I think I see 3 for no cultivation. Is that correct?
So 3 for cultivation.
But if it's tied to delivery only, does that change Councilman Green's nod? Because this will be presented as one package for the city council to vote on. So if... Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You want to do a show of hands?
Yeah, show of hands would be better than head nods.
All those who support the two cultivations in the business park.
Okay, I would support that.
2 and 2. No, 2, 3.
You want to break the tie?
3 and 2, because you supported cultivation.
I support cultivation,
Okay.
but I don't support the measures.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead.
My clarification, Councilman Green, was if when the city attorney presents a draft initiative that says retail only, which you indicated you wouldn't support only the delivery only, but there's a component or two that you would support, the factor depends on how you would vote on the package as a whole, and when he's trying to come with the consensus for what to present as the whole.
Well,
yeah, and
at the
mine,
moment-
unless it includes retail storefront, which I know it's not.
Correct.
As a whole, I'm going to be voting against. So
then-
I have no need to break ties between the four that are going to craft a measure. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Because it is the way it is, I'm going to leave cultivation in, and
Okay.
on the 12th, you can decide whether to leave it in or take it out.
Sounds good.
You'll just have to work that out. Okay. Let me see. I'd like to then jump, by eliminating the retail, you've answered several of my other questions. So jumping to the taxation initiative, again, the reason for that is we don't know what the state's going to compel us. We might say we don't want anything. If we're required to have it, I certainly think we need a taxation ordinance in place to protect the city at that point without having to wait a minimum of 2 years to go to the voters to seek that authorization in the future. So are you comfortable with the tax rates that we have proposed? I noticed that the adult use sales tax of 12% is actually a little lower than San Diego's maximum of 15%. We're both at 5% at the moment. Theirs has a little higher top end. And if the distinction between medical and adult use is eliminated, I'm confident the city will want to tax everything as adult use at that point. So if you want any changes in these tax rates, could we go back to that slide, please?
So in San Diego, it's a 15% tax?
It's a cap of 15. Here we have a cap of 12. I'm ambivalent. I just want to mention it. So if anyone wants any changes in these percentages, please speak up now, or they'll be there on the 12th. Okay, they'll be there on the 12th.
Councilman Franklin, go.
Well, I just want to register that I support the taxation initiative, which I think is a separate issue entirely from the first issue. This is fail-safe if it either is legalized through the Citizens Initiative or through our initiative or through later action as the legislature. This provides we have a taxation structure. So I support that regardless, and I'm hopeful that might actually be unanimous. I just want to say, with the cultivation, I'm seeing potentially 3 no votes on the alternative. Can I win one of your votes to eliminate cultivation so that we can get to 3 votes and 4 votes? Because right now there's only 2 votes for an initiative with cultivation.
But even if you go to cultivation, who's your he's not going to vote no matter what.
Right. I'm just saying right now, if Councilwoman Rigby votes against it because she doesn't want cultivation.
She wants only delivery. So.
Right. So if she votes against it because of cultivation and Councilman Green votes against it, and I vote against it, then you don't have 3 votes to pass it. So I guess what I'm saying is,
what's the point of all this discussion?
I'm trying to get to I'm trying to get to a consensus here. And I'm suggesting.
Why don't you switch?
What's that?
Why don't you switch?
That's a fair question.
And I know you're all about, we're talking about the taxes. There is the ability to tax it and generate revenue if that's what interests you. And
Well, the tax issue, I think we deal with in the separate question. I think
not for cultivation, though.
Not the cultivation. I mean, okay.
Okay, what?
I made my pitch.
Okay, so you're not going to change your mind? And Councilmember Green is not going to go anywhere unless we have some kind of retail dispensaries.
But I do support the draft tax ordinance as a whole. So there you go. Unanimously, let's tax them. They want to pay taxes. We will take their money.
Thank you very much. And since no one has suggested any changes in these rates, these are the ones that will appear before you in 2 weeks.
I'm going to interject. I was asked about the tax. The slide you have up are the ranges 0 to 12, 0 to 10, 0 to 8. So I'm okay with you keeping your ranges. But as I said at the last meeting, if this is something that we're going to do and we're going to allow this business, I am not in favor of taxing any business more than we tax any other business just because of the type of business it is. So that's my sticking point.
Even though it would maybe take more law enforcement and more, it could possibly cost us more to have that type of a business?
Well, some of the discussion over the last however many meetings we've had this discussion goes to that if legalizing it, we're going to be having less crime around it. So I'm not sure I'm seeing those two concepts marry up. But I think, and we talked about this at the last meeting, that there are some avenues, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. City Attorney, that if you have a business that's creating some type of burden on law enforcement, is there not an avenue that they can be held accountable or responsible for that additional monies? Like when we have like the graffiti issue happening and those taggers were caught, they were tasked with paying back the city for the monies that it took us to enforce that. Is that not the case here as well?
We have been successful in that arena. The courts have sole discretion with respect to this type of an issue. And as you are aware, with the exception of criminal prosecution, we've been relatively unsuccessful on the civil side getting any effective remedies from the civil bench. And so while in theory we could recover costs at some point in time, the graffiti that we get comes back really through the probation department in terms of probation. And if we can convince the courts after getting a criminal conviction for doing something wrong, we might be able to get a recovery that way. But simply because they're creating a public nuisance doesn't create a criminal case. They have to be violating one of our ordinances.
But I would say also, we're not charging anybody here more than we're charging a regular sales tax that we're charging everyone else. They're all less.
Right, no, I
but
understand
maybe in
that.
5 or 10 years, if taxes should happen to go up, that gives somebody flexibility to.
I see the slide, but in previous conversations and previous meetings, the discussion has gone to tax them at a higher rate to pay for these other services. And several of them have said, well, of the ones who agree to be taxed and come into the light, have said that they would agree to paying more taxes. I'm stating my position is I don't agree with that. I don't think that we should tax any one business more than we tax any other business, and we certainly shouldn't be taxing their business to pay for the bad actors that are not them. So if the natural sales tax increases over the years, then absolutely, increase their tax as well.
But this right here doesn't. I mean, this here is not more than what our sales tax is.
Right, I understand, but the question came up about should we tax them at a higher rate to pay for law enforcement? That was the question that I was asked, and my position was no. I think that answered your question.
Okay. Councilmember Franklin.
I just wanted to point out, you may have read news articles to the effect that there's a glut of overproduction of marijuana from California, which has been destabilizing the marketplace. I'm hoping that that information might cause someone to change their mind about including cultivation.
Deputy Mayor. Changing your mind?
Well, I just want to get this done, so, I mean, if we're going to get hung up on the cultivation, then I'm willing to compromise to get a deal done and make sure this actually works.
I'll go with you on that one.
The
So
people,
that would be all.
and the people get what they want, you know, I think,
It's distasteful no matter what.
yeah, but I'm just kind of getting tired of everybody just trying to make their points to seem a little bit better than somebody else here, but none of us are going to be happy. You know, this is a compromise. Nobody's getting what they want. Councilman Green's not getting what he wants. Councilman Franklin's not Councilwoman Rigby is not getting what she wants. You know, I mean, nobody really is. So, you know, let's just find something, just get something on the ballot so that we can vote on it. We have to vote on it by June 12th so that we can actually have a ballot measure. Otherwise, we're going to have another meeting next week to iron this out. And I don't think we're going to really get anywhere with it.
So as Mr. Piper expressed, it looks like there's 4 of you that support 3 deliveries, and there's 3 of you that support the taxation ordinance. Is that correct?
There's only 3 of us that support the taxation ordinance?
I think 4 support taxation.
Why would
yeah, 4 of us do count.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
4 of us support the taxation, but
For support.
it's not the same 4.
But as Ms. Zimmerman said, when it comes back, as a package, you may not have that. Yeah.
Tax is different, right?
Yeah, they're not packaged together.
Okay.
Right?
They will be voted on separately, obviously.
Right.
And I think I understand what all of you don't want, which is exactly as the city manager said. There will be no cultivation. There will be no storefront. The other licenses continue to exist.
But was there the type 15? Was that did we get rid of that?
Is that acceptable?
Was it 15? What was the number of that one?
The type 12s
Type
have been
12 is out.
removed.
The
Type
one that
12
had
is
all
out.
the 3 or 4 things. Did we get rid of that one? Okay, got rid of that one. Okay. So we're all set? Are we all set?
We are totally set. Let's go.
I'm asking them down there to make sure they're all set. Are you guys all set?
I believe you are. I believe I am.
Are we all set up here, down
What
here?
everyone wants.
Can we be adjourned? We are adjourned at what time? 8:33.